Oh, he's on my
Oh, there he
screen.
is.
I know.
He just bumped up. He's there.
He's the guy with suspenders on, Nancy.
Good girl. There
I
you
can't
go.
see. I've only got the speaker view on.
Oh, okay.
I have the list on the side instead.
Hi, Jen.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, Jen. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone. Feels like it's been a long time.
December 17th.
Boy, a lot of viruses going over the dam, huh? Along with the water. And the water's back up. That's good.
Yeah.
You're all up live on everything whenever you're ready to go.
Okay. Molly's here where everybody's here, so let me get my notes out here. Okay, as chair of the Exeter Planning Board, I find that due to the state emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. On December 31st, 2020, public notice of this meeting was posted to the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street. As provided in the public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done in a roll call. Let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there's anyone in the room with you during this meeting and who that person is, son, daughter, spouse, etc., which is required under the right to know law. So start that off. I'm chairman of the board, and I'm Langdon Plummer, and there's no one here with me. Nancy, you're to my left on the screen.
Nancy Belanger, alternate, and there's no one in the room with me.
Gwen?
Gwen English, and there is no one in the room with me at the moment.
Okay, Pete Steckler.
Hi, Pete Steckler, alternate. I am alone.
All right, Mark DeTore.
Mark Detour, alternate, and I am here alone.
Thank you. And Pete Cameron.
I'm here alone.
Okay, John Gruder.
John Gruder, and I am the only one in the room.
And back with us, Aaron Brown, Vice Chair.
In the room alone, Aaron Brown.
Jen Martell, please.
Jen Martella, and I am alone.
Dave Sharples, Town Planner.
Dave Sharples, Town Planner, and I'm in the room.
And Maui Cowan, our Select Board Rep.
Hi, Molly Cowan, Select Board Rep. My children will be in here briefly, and then they're going up to bed. And if everybody could mute if you're not talking, it's a lot of background noise.
Yes, yep. Okay. Our agenda for this meeting are public hearings and the public hearing on proposed zoning amendments for the 2021 town meeting warrant. I'll read them and then I'll ask, excuse me, Dave to lead us on this process. So amend Article 2, or that Article 11, excuse me, proposed changes to update the Public Capital Facilities Impact Fee Ordinance. Public hearing to amend the existing public school and recreation impact fee schedule. Public hearing and proposed amendments to planning board site plan review and subdivision regulations. Amend section 9.4 flood hazard areas by updating the date of the flood insurance rate maps that the regulations references, and that I understand the selectmen have done already.
No, I'm sorry. It was the last one. I got confused. The last one, amending section 9.16, is moot.
Oh, okay. So amend section 9.16 by updating the footnotes denoting the new NHDES website references. And so the selectmen have done that one. Okay, Dave?
Yes, I would suggest taking them one by one, and let's focus on the first one, which is amend Article 11, proposed changes to update the Public Capital Facilities Impact Fee Ordinance. It's our only zoning ordinance amendment. And as described previously to the board, Bruce Mayberry, our consultant that we hired to look at our impact fees and our impact fee ordinance, recommended several changes to our impact fees. I did enclose a copy of the amendment along with the prior memo that describes the changes. We did discuss this at the last meeting, and the planning board decided to hold a public hearing on the amendment at this meeting, and I provide a motion below in the event the board decides to recommend these changes, which would be a recommendation to forward it to the town warrant because it does require a vote of the legislative body because it is a zoning amendment. Just to recap, most of the changes in the amendment that's enclosed in your packet is housekeeping, just to be consistent with the current laws since it hasn't been updated since 2003. And the substantive change was we clarified the exemption for age-restricted housing, and we made it clear how to calculate that. So it's no longer a waiver with the planning board. If it's age-restricted housing, it's 100% exempts, is restricted to 55 and older, then it automatically gets an exemption. The planning board doesn't need to grant a waiver because there's no school impact. This is only on the school side. And it shouldn't pay. If they do an 80-20, like up to 20% unrestricted units, then it would pay 20% of the school impact fee. The Master Plan Oversight Committee did review this and is okay, it approves the suggested language.
Okay.
I would suggest opening the public hearing and then close the public hearing after anyone who wants to speak, and then the board can deliberate, and I provided a motion.
Okay. Well, then if there's no other comments from the board initially, then I'll open the public hearing portion of the meeting that, in response to the proposed changes updating the capital facilities impact fee ordinances. Anybody you see there, Dave, in the audience? Do we have an audience?
We do not have an audience. There are 0 attendees, so I would imagine no one is.
We do have an applicant, and he's welcome to comment if he wishes. But
Mr. Steckler has his hand up.
Okay. Peter? Can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
Much better.
So I had one very minor grammatical suggestion and then a question. And the grammatical suggestion was to 1.7.3, where it says for those residential units, blah, 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 shall pay the percentage. So I don't know if you can just get rid of the word for. You could get rid of the word for, and or you could get rid of the words for those. I think it just doesn't read properly to me. And then I had a question under 1.7.2 in the middle where it says the value of contributions or improvements shall be credited only towards facilities of like kind. And I guess I didn't know if I didn't know what that meant. In reading that, it's not clear to me what that means. So
can you tell me what section again, please?
Yeah, 1.7.2 in the middle of the paragraph where it references facilities of like kind. And it may just be that I don't understand what that means, which is fine. But if I don't understand it, maybe other people don't understand it as well. So,
well, this waiver it tries to be inclusive of either a waiver from school or recreation. So in order to get a waiver, and say, I'm building a ice skating rink on our property, and that would be of like kind to a recreational facility. They can't say I'm building a garage, an indoor parking garage, and that's going to be recreational. or I'm contributing something to the schools that would be related to. That's how I understand that.
Okay, if that's clear to you, maybe that's that's enough. It just wasn't clear to me when reading that what it actually meant to the like kind of what, because you might it doesn't specify what the needs of the town is there, but maybe at the time it will be appropriate what that like kind thing is. I wouldn't want somebody to do something that the town doesn't actually need and argue, oh, it's of like kind. I don't know. So I'll leave it there. If it makes sense to everyone else, sounds good by me. But it was just a question that came up for me in reviewing this. Thank you.
How about back to Dave for a second, about your first comment, Pete? Could you go back and just, again, I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, so that was 1.7.3, I think on page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think, where it says, for those residential units that are lawfully restricted to occupancy by senior citizens age 55 or over, but allow up to 20% of the units to be occupied by any age shall pay. I think you could say the residential units shall pay, but for those residential units shall pay doesn't really, I'm not like an English major or anything, but that didn't read properly to me.
Yeah, if you take out everything in between, you're reading for those shall pay. And I see what you're saying. I could just strike for those, capitalize R. So it would be residential units that are lawfully restricted to occupancy, shall pay. I completely understand where you're coming from.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. As amended then.
Anybody else? We're open to the public. Any public showed up at all, Dave?
No, there are 0 attendees, but Aaron Brown has his hand up.
Okay, Aaron, you got your hand up, but your microphone's off.
Oh, that's the way it's supposed to be until I get acknowledged by the chair.
Okay.
So, Dave, I think on the waiver part, when they talk about something in lieu of a cash payment, they have to get a waiver to accomplish that. So, Pete, I don't think they can be doing something that the town doesn't want because they're asking for a waiver. So if they go and start doing stuff on their own and then expect to get it, that's going to be completely at their own risk.
Yeah.
And we were trying to, I'm on the committee that worked on this, and we were really trying to keep it very straightforward so that there wasn't as much confusion and as much argument about waivers. This section of our regulation has been a source of many waiver requests in my time on this planning board. Yeah. And I would say we have often negotiated those requests with applicants. And it always seems like there has been inconsistency in the past, and that gets brought up by any applicant trying to forward their argument. You know, they might have something that they see that this was granted 15 years ago, and so I should get it too. And this hopefully will help eliminate that going forward. That was really a big thing, I think, that Pete Cameron, John Gruder, and myself, and certainly Dave were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying or providing that context.
Gwen English has her hand.
Gwen.
Yes, thank you. This is three little clerical questions that I had on page 4 on the last line. Just mentions the planning board. And just to keep it, this is really picky, but just to keep it consistent, can the P and the B be capitalized?
As it is in some other places, yes.
Lowercase. Am I hopefully on the same page with everybody else?
Well, this is the page I'm looking at, it is capitalized.
1.6.1.
Oh, 161, okay.
At the bottom.
Oh, yes, yep,
You see that?
yes, should be.
And then going to the next page, at the first line on the next page, same thing. And then I actually would like to propose like a change of wording for that first sentence on the page 5. And I wonder if we could change it to when no planning board approval is required, or, and this is where I've changed it, or when approval has been given prior to. I think that sentence, as it's written, it's hard to understand it.
Planning board approval is required or has been made prior to the adoption or amendment of an impact fee ordinance.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's kind of a negative approach.
Because, yeah. So I'm just thinking it might be more clear if it can say when approval has been given prior to the adoption, and then just keep going on with that sentence from there.
Well, but I think when it's trying to encompass also when no approval is necessary.
Okay. Maybe you could just put that in there, where no approval is necessary. I don't know. It just sound. I read it and I couldn't understand what it was trying to say when it just says when no planning board approval is required or has been made prior to
The adoption
I kind of was scratching my head trying to figure out what that meant.
of an impact fee.
It means well, I mean, it's almost doesn't need to be in there. It's just saying basically to a common word people use is grandfathered. It's like if you submit an application, well, actually, if you submit an application before the rule changes, you're not subject to the subsequent zoning. And I believe that's what it's saying.
Okay. Well, maybe you can tweak that a little. And that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Gwen.
I think it needs another word, Dave. If you read the first sentence, this is when number 1.6 assessment and payment of impact fee. First sentence, all impact fees shall be assessed at the time of planning board approval of a subdivision or site plan. Okay. And then another situation when no planning board approval is required, and you need to say application has been made prior to the adoption or amendment of an impact fee ordinance, and then it works. So okay. Add application in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I get that. I get it. I don't think that would be a substantive change anyway to just make it right what it's intended to do. Because when a project is vested and is exempt from subsequent changes in zoning is a little bit of a moving target. It changes and it's based on state law. It has changed. So if you put application, then you're saying that's when it starts, and it might right when it is, but its acceptance of the planning board application is really vested. So I will work with, I don't think it's the substantive change. It's just trying to get the intent across that they shouldn't pay if they don't have to, according to law. That's what it's trying to say. And I can say that.
Thank you,
That's
Dave.
all right.
Okay. Aaron, your hand's still up. You want to say something?
Nope. Sorry about that.
Anyone else? Then would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
and I hope I've got the right one. I move that the board place the proposed amendment regarding Article 11, Public Capital Facilities Impact Fee, titled Proposed Amendment for the January 14th, 2021 Planning Board meeting and dated January 7th, 2021 on the 2021 town warrant with a recommendation for adoption.
Is there a second?
May I add before a second, as amended tonight?
You're breaking up and we can't hear you right now, Dave. I can't.
I can't hear.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you. I can.
Yeah, I'm using a government issued computer this meeting, so.
Ah, that explains it.
Yeah. So if you can hear me, I would just add to that motion as amended tonight to capture the
yes.
two amendment for the striking the for those and clarifying the language to make it clear when when a project doesn't have to pay the fee.
All right. I will add to that motion as amended tonight. Is that enough?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll second.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? And we'll do a roll call vote. Going into the list, Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Pete Cameron,
Yes.
Molly Cowan,
Yes.
Gwen English,
Yes.
Jen Martell,
Yes.
John Gruder,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Unanimous decision. Thank you very much. Okay, Dave. Amendment section 9.4, is that where we're at now?
The next one was amend the existing public rec and impact fee schedule, but due to the time, as we're moving toward 7 o'clock and have a regular meeting, I could skip over that one. That one's not critical. I can just put that one on the next available agenda, and I will jump to the amendments to amending section 9.4 flood hazard areas. Let me grab that. This is critical that we do that. We do this, and we do it this evening. I did mention this at prior meetings. The state has updated their flood insurance rate maps, or they call them FIRM, and they asked for our site plan subdivision regulations to be amended in accordance with their suggestion, and it's in your packet. They suggested just basically it's striking dates and putting new dates in to be current, and this needs to be done prior to tomorrow, actually. So,
Well, let's get on with it.
yeah. And I attached a document from Samara Ebinger from the Office of Strategic Initiatives. Basically, like I said, deleting 100-year wherever it appears and adding current and effective prior to the flood insurance rate maps, and deleting May 17th, 1982. This will make it so saying current and effective, if we have any date changes in the future, it'll just adopt those automatically because of this language, and we won't have to do this again. And I did provide a motion for your convenience. And the select board did do their part at their January 4th meeting and amended and adopted a resolution to this effect as well.
Okay. So is there any discussion about the floodplain development ordinance zoning amendment on the part of the board? Madam Chair is open to having a motion made to.
Chair, I'll make a motion.
Okay, Glenn?
If you're ready. I move to amend section 6.6.2.4 in parenthesis V, section 7.4.18 Section 7.6.13, and Section 7.7.8 of the Exeter Site Plan Review and Subdivision Regulations as presented in the document titled titled Amendments to Exeter Subdivision and Site Plan Review Regulations, created by Samara Ebinger from the New Hampshire Office of Strategic Initiatives, Floodplain Management Program, and dated January 5th, 2021.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Pete. Any questions, conversations? All right. Roll call vote. John Gruder,
Yes.
Jen Martell,
Yes.
Gwen English,
Yes.
Molly Cohen,
Yes.
Pete Cameron,
Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
and Lang Plummer votes yes. Unanimous vote. Okay. And the last one Dave said the selectmen have taken care of. All right. Now, do we need to adjourn this meeting, Dave? And then open the other meeting?
No, it's the same Zoom link. So if it's 7 o'clock, well, yeah, you got 4 minutes. So
All right. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Pete. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Pete Cameron,
Yes.
Molly Cowan,
Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Jen Martell,
Yes.
Gwen English,
Yes.
and John Gruder.
Yes.
And that's unanimous. I vote yes also. So we are adjourned.
Hi, sorry to butt in. Exeter TV here. Am I pulling you off of everything? Is this a non-public meeting you're entering?
No, we've finished one meeting.
Okay,
That was a public hearing, and now we're going to move into our regular meeting.
thank you.
So I'll start over.
the regular meeting starts at 7.
Starts, right, at 7, correct.
Thank you. Sorry for asking.
I think there's some attendees on here that probably just want to stay on instead of, if we cut it out, we might boot them off. So I guess just keep everyone on would be the best thing to do.
All right, time to take a breath. I got to get a glass of water. Oh, no, here we go, right here. Okay, I'll begin with the Salutation here. As chair of the Exeter Planning Board, I find it that due to the state emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. On December 31st, 2020, public notice of this meeting was posted to the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street. As provided in that the public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone. Please note that all votes taken during the meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during the meeting and who that person is, son, daughter, etc., which is required under the right to know law. So we'll start off, and I'm Langdon Plummer, chair of the board, and I'm by myself. Next, John Gruder.
John Gruder, and I am alone in the room.
Gwen English.
Gwen English, and I am alone in the room.
Jen Martell.
Jen Martell and I'm alone.
Pete Carmen. Excuse me.
Pete Cameron, I'm alone in the room.
Pete Steckler.
Pete Steckler, I am alone.
Nancy Belanger.
Nancy Belanger, alternate, and I'm alone in the room.
Molly Cowan, who's select board rep.
Molly Cowan, Select Board Rep. I'm alone.
Aaron Brown.
Aaron Brown, alone in the room.
And Dave Sharples, our town planner.
Dave Sharples, town planner. I am alone in the room.
Thank you. Board members.
Chair.
First item of business is
Lang?
to, yes.
Did you get Mark?
Oh, I didn't. Mark, I missed you again.
Smiling.
That's because he looks like a developer. Could you introduce yourself, Mark?
Mark Detour, alternate, alone.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for that. Something about being chair and a good board. You're always being watched by your board, which I appreciate. All right, so first item on this agenda is the December 3rd and the minutes of December 3rd and of December 17th. The last time we met, wait a minute, I got 18th of August, December 3rd. So let's take December 3rd first, please. Any comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple.
Okay, Peter. Cameron.
If I may go.
Please do.
Let's go to line 317. I think that's 317.
That's 317?
317 begins house.
Yes.
All right, continuing on, reading the sentence, the finger wetland seen in the sidewalk wasn't planned to be filled in and is, I think, no, should be not.
I think you're right.
So my interpretation of that is that it's actually supposed to be and now proposing to fill that in. That was the wetland that they hadn't previously planned to fill, but then they changed their plan. And that was my only suggestion as well.
That's it. You're right. That's much better.
Oh, it's okay. Change your T to W now, huh?
Well, it's very different, so we need to get it right.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Pete, for clarity. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a couple more with great trepidation.
Everyone's watching.
328.
Yes, sir.
Little after the middle, Mr. Smith shared the proposal. I'm not quite sure what shared means. I think I know what happened, but is that sharing the proposal?
Does he mean screen shared?
Is that unique to the fact that this has to be done via Zoom? And that's what he's sharing the proposal?
Maybe presented would be a better word than shared.
And that would cover you either way.
Yeah. Would that be okay, Pete?
That's fine. Then the same one is the use of the word shared is down in 331. Calculations were shared with the DPW. Maybe that's okay there.
That's okay there, yeah.
Okay, two other little nits. And here's the word of use. Again, the word of the use of the word no. That's 371.
71, okay.
The costly affair for the first approval and is no table. No is not quite the right word there.
Oh, I just figured that one out, Pete. I was having trouble with that. But when you read it, probably not able.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I looked at that too.
You gotta close up the, move the T back to the no and
got the spacing wrong. Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
I'm then back one more and then I will be quiet for the rest of the session. 362. It seems to me that when you read that sentence, one is talking about, you, Chair, are talking about, doesn't it handle the runoff better? And then Mr. Smith indicated, without question, it will improve. I guess that's saying the same thing. I beg your pardon. The modification didn't handle the runoff better, and then Smith comes on and says, well, it is improving. Is that inconsistent?
Well, the into is interesting. Getting into Mr. Hamill's property. I think the objective was to get.
It will improve the water getting onto the property? That doesn't seem quite right.
Maybe reduce instead of improve.
That would work.
That would be better, yes.
Because that's the last thing he wants is improved water flow.
In that direction, yes.
I would hate to put reduce in there. That's not what Christian Smith said, because reduction of stormwater is, it's a technical term. And if he didn't say it would reduce it, I mean, I think maybe that's what he meant, but if he didn't say it, I'd be reluctant to put reduction in there. Maybe Daniel can take a look at it.
Yeah, Daniel has to look at that.
Okay, we refer to the wordsmith. That's it, Pete, for you?
Yes.
Anyone else? Like Gwen?
Just a really quick one. On line 133, the last word should be for.
Wait a minute now. This is a major change here.
Major change.
Okay.
Just add an F.
Now, what was your comment?
Line 133.
Yep.
The last word.
Okay.
I'm wondering if on line 177 we should specify what alumni and Portsmouth mean. So Alumni Drive and Portsmouth Avenue.
So add Ave after Portsmouth. Yep.
On line 230, oh no, 219.
Okay.
I think maybe it should read the property is unique and far from abutting properties. I mean, maybe he said so far, but I'm not sure. And is in the center of the campus, add is. No. That may be what he said, but that's it.
I think probably and would work there. And so far from yeah. Okay, anyone else? Would you like to make a motion then?
Well, yeah, I'll do it.
Oh, okay. Well, Pete, go ahead.
I guess I move that the minutes of the planning board meeting on December 3, 2020 are approved with the suggestions agreed to earlier.
Okay. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Gwen. Moved and seconded. Roll call time. So, where's my checklist here? What did I do? There'll be a slight delay. Oh, good grief, Charlie Brown, what'd you do here? Here we are. Aaron Brown.
Yes.
And Pete Cameron.
Yes.
And Molly Cowan.
Yes.
Gwen English.
Yes.
Jen Martell.
Yes.
John, you're up.
Yes.
And I say yes. Unanimous, okay. Let's move now to the meetings of the minutes of December 17th, please. Any comments, corrections, concerns?
Please.
Is that you, Pete?
That was me.
Okay.
Line 105.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayberry will be looking at the ordinance and figuring out what the town, and I'm not quite sure what the AN there is.
And CAN.
And I think can be charging this year.
I think there needs to be a D.
D?
And B, oh, and, yeah. Can.
And while we're on nits, 113, midway through, it adds a Dan facilities per thousand. B, I think the word option needs to be added there. Because you're talking about options, or options B and C. Something needs to indicate what that those are options.
And he does specify option A above.
Yes. Okay, that sounds good.
I have a really simple one on line 58.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gwen, you should have gone first.
No need. Just add an S to business on 58, line 58.
Okay.
Just a little typo. That's it.
All right. Anything else? Stecker, do you have any?
So I have one, and this may be debatable. It's on line 132, where after we talked about adding the impact fee rates to the CIP process, it says Mr. Sharples indicated the board could do that. I thought that it was I interpreted that discussion as it's not just that we could do it, but that we are planning to build that review into the annual CIP planning board process. That was my understanding, that that's something that we're planning to do, not just that we could do. I don't know if others agree with that based on the conversation, but if that's something that we're planning to do, it would be nice to have it documented here. Thanks.
Okay.
I think Mr. Steckler's interpretation of that is correct.
So, Dave, Mr. Sharples indicated the board would do that?
That's what we discussed, certainly, was that so it wouldn't fall through the cracks.
Right. Okay, let's do that. Thank you, Pete. Any others?
Yeah, can I just weigh in on that one a little bit? At that point, I think Dave said that, and then we did agree that it would be part of it. It's just a technical matter. I just want to throw it there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, how about a motion, please? As amended.
I'll make a motion,
Okay, thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Chair. I move to approve the Exeter Planning Board minutes of December 17th, 2020 as amended.
All right, a second, please. John?
I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't want to second it.
Okay, darn, picked the wrong person. Gwen? Oh, no, you made the motion. Pete Cameron?
I made the motion.
Oh, you, excuse me.
I wasn't at the
That's
meeting
right.
either.
I was looking at you to make the motion.
I'll second.
We got a second. Thank you.
Damn it.
All right. Roll call vote. Here we go. Let's go with John Gruder.
I'll abstain.
Abstain. Okay. And Jen Martell.
Aye.
Gwen English.
Abstain.
And Molly Cowan.
Yes.
And Pete Cameron.
Yes.
Aaron Brown.
Yes.
And I vote yes with 2 abstentions. Thank you. All right. Now I put that and that over here. All right. Now somehow. Okay. Well, just gotta take a second to find where I hid the agenda. Yes, it's January 14th on it. Okay. Application of Patricia Duvall for a minor subdivision of existing 3.339 acre parcel located at 105 Brentwood Road to create a new residential lot. Subject property is located in the R1 Low Density Residential Zoning District and is tax map parcel number 60-24. It's planning board case number 2019-19. And I'd ask Dave if things are ready to go with this. and if the board should accept this application.
I consider this application complete for review purposes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Somebody like to make a motion to review this application? Please?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, John. Second?
Second.
Okay, Peter. Good. Okay, roll call vote. Aaron Brown
Yes.
and Pete Cameron.
Yes.
Molly Cowan,
Yes.
Gwen English,
Yes.
Jen Martell,
Yes.
John Gruder,
Yes.
Lang Plummer. Unanimous. Okay, we're ready to go. Dave, did you have some comments you would like to share with us as we start this review?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you stated, the applicant is seeking a minor subdivision of an existing 3.39 acre parcel located at 105 Brentwood Road to create one new residential lot. The applicant submitted a minor subdivision plan and supporting documents dated November 30th, 2020, and they're enclosed in your packet. The applicant did appear before the Zoning Board of Adjustment at their August 18th, 2020 meeting, seeking relief from the minimum lot area requirement in the R1 zoning district, which is 2 acres without water and sewer available. This would be on a well and septic. The ZBA granted the variance to permit a single-family lot to be created with less than the 2-acre minimum lot area. I did include the minutes of that meeting for your review. There was no technical review committee review of the application. However, it has been reviewed by the code enforcement officer for compliance with the zoning regulations and with the conditions of the ZBA variance approval. DPW provided one comment indicating that the applicant would be required to obtain a state DOT driveway permit for the driveway access, since that is not on a road in the urban compact or under our control. And I reviewed the application and the plans, and I did note that the proposed well radius, 75-foot well radius on the new lot falls into the state right-of-way. That's not an ideal situation. I did call the state. They have some procedures with that. I did talk to them, and they said if the onus falls upon the well, whoever drills the well, to follow all the state rules and locate it appropriately, they would, so it's their state right of way. It's not our local roadway, and they seem okay and confident that the whoever drills the well it's incumbent upon them to follow any setbacks and so forth. And in the event the board decides to take action, I do have a few standard conditions of approval that I would recommend if the board gets to that point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who will be speaking on this tonight?
Good evening. This is Henry Boyd with Millennium Engineering, and for protocol, I am with my very able assistant, Kat, who is here to help me with any technical issues.
You didn't throw your wife out, did you?
I'm not nearly as smart as I look.
Okay.
So she's here to help me, and also Ms. Duval is here at my office with us as well. So as Dave, you're very capable planner, basically went through the whole gamut of what we'd like to do. It is a simple minor subdivision. We have received state subdivision approval, and I will remind you, although most of Exeter is sewered, those areas that have septic, there are state regulations that anytime you create a lot less than 5 acres in size, you need state subdivision approval first. So that was granted to us on 11/23/2020, and I have applied that information to the plan, Mr. Chairman. The plan set is made up of 3 sheets. The first one is intended to be recorded at the registry. The second one has the topography for the lot on it, and then the third one shows the lot loading areas, test pit information, and everything, because this is a septic system for each lot. The lot has 3.39 acres in size, as David said. We did receive a variance from the zoning board last year. The requirement was that the one lot be at least 2 acres in size. The one lot be at least 1 acre in size. After a final survey of the boundary, we ended up with more land than the tax map had shown. As always, it's an approximation, so we more than meet the requirement of the zoning board relief that was granted. It has over 700 feet of frontage, as I may have already mentioned, so it's a pretty straightforward application, and I think I'm done unless you have any questions for me.
Board have any questions for Henry?
John Gruder has his hand up.
John.
Yeah, question about the well.
Yeah.
Is that the 75-foot protective radius? And we're out onto Brentwood Road and we're into the septic area. Is that something we approve? That the DES says that's all right, or?
Mr. Gruder, as I stated, the subdivision has already been approved at the state level by the Subsurface Bureau. It's not infrequent that a well radius will fall into the right-of-way, and that's why they approved it. It does not invade the septic area. So if you look at the plans and even the one that is to be recorded, sheet 1, it shows the septic area, the 4,000 square foot septic area. So there is no prohibition against it. You cannot place the well radius on another property,
right. I know, I understand that.
But it can go into the right of way.
But again, now on the septic, we're at the edge of the septic.
Sure.
That's all right. There is, so you're into the 4,000 square feet.
No, we're not into the 4,000 square feet. The 4,000 square feet is built outside of it. So even though
I don't
hit the edge of it,
I don't square that thing off.
If you squared it off, you'd have more than 4,000 square feet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to follow that up, Henry. Can you tell me why the septic has to be there? Why couldn't the septic be moved in such a manner to be further away, allowing the well radius to be within the property line?
It could be, Mr. Chairman, but where the test pits were dug, that's where the 4,000 square foot area fell. We could, at a great expense to Ms. Duval, do additional test pits out there for the sake of moving it back. But as I said, the DES is comfortable with the way that it's drawn. They don't take issue to it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have a question? Gwen, you had your hand up. Is it still up there?
Yeah, it is. I guess I'm following up John Gruder's comment, and I don't understand why if you fill out the borders of the septic area, why that isn't considered being in the well radius. Did I miss something? It clearly, that upper corner or that corner clearly is on my plan. It looks like it's in the well radius.
I don't get that. That dark black line with the dot actually is not a rectangle. The 4,000 square foot septic area is not a rectangle. One of the corners is, if it was a rectangle, it would be smaller than that, because it wouldn't. You follow me? I think it doesn't cut into it. It just kind of goes. It's right next to it.
Okay.
I think what you're saying is Henry shaped it to be 4,000 square feet and not get in the radius, correct? It just looks odd.
Correct. There you go. Got it.
Exactly right.
Okay. All right.
Aaron, you're so brilliant. Thank you.
You normally don't.
The outside of the 4,000 square foot septic area is denoted by a thick black line with a single dot in between them.
I see.
So just follow that all the way around, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
You don't normally see a leach field with that shape.
Well, it actually,
Usually a rectangle or square or something.
well, the leach field won't be. Understand that the leach field is going to be very, very much smaller than that figure.
Correct.
That figure is just the septic reserve area, so that they had to have a secondary placement of another field if the field failed. So a lot of times you will see on tighter lots, you will see them exactly like this. If we could do it over again, we probably would have moved those test pits back about 25 feet and have a square area, but it would be just the sake of spending her money to do that when the DES is satisfied with it.
Okay.
Yeah, and Henry, there's no wetlands on this new lot, correct?
There are not. There is a small wetland area on Lot A where the existing house resides. It is right next to the driveway that is just east of. You'll see that there's a gravel driveway labeled, and there's a culvert that runs under that driveway. So there are a few wetland flags down there, but a very small area. But no wetland on the new lot being created.
Mm-hmm.
So when you consider that, no wetlands, a relatively, good amount of squarish shape, a 1 acre building lot in that area is of 1 acre of upland. It's pretty significant to only get one house lot there. So I'm glad that you were able to get the variance. I think that was appropriate.
Yep.
And I'm real familiar with this site because it's not too far from where I live, and I drive by that property constantly. And it's kind of on a hill as well. So
yeah, there's really good soils there as well. They perk very well, and it is set up on a knoll there. And you're exactly right. You will notice that there's a very old stone foundation that's out there that at one time, way back in time, may have been a house. We're not sure the exact history of it, but I show it on the plan. It's been delinquent, obviously, for decades, but we show it.
Mr. Chair, I have just another follow-up question.
Yes, Gwen, go ahead, please.
Your driveway for Lot B is at the crest of the hill, and this is also I also live on the road, and I'm quite familiar with it, and I'm sure the state will take this into account, but I'm really concerned about the sight distance for people getting in and out of that lot where that driveway is placed, and I'm sure the state will look at that as well and take all that into consideration. But people don't go 35 miles an hour on that. It's a speedway. The minute the speed limit changes from the urban area, which is at 25 near Colcord Pond, and then goes to 35. It's a speedway. I can hear cars revving their engines all the way from my house. I don't know how far, past Greenleaf probably. And I don't know if you've done sight distance measurements or what has been done to just make sure that people are going to be safe going in and out of there.
We actually have done sight distance measurements, Gwen, and that's why the driveway is placed exactly where it is placed. You'll notice on this plan, I also show 400-foot arrows.
Yeah, straight dotted lines in both directions.
Yeah, Exeter is very unique because as Mr. Sharp was pointed out, this is not part of the urban compact. So you do have areas that are state highway that run through your town that you do take responsibility for. This is not one of them. This is a state highway. So there is a challenge there. It's a vertical challenge. It's not a curve situation. So it's a sight distance through the hill. So we have afforded 400 feet in either direction for this. There is some minor grading that we're going to have to do and some tree removal out there to ensure that we do get the sight distance. We have submitted a preliminary plan to DOT already and received their feedback. So we will be addressing their concerns to make sure that everybody can stay safe.
Okay, other questions, concerns? Anybody in the public, Dave? That we know that would want to speak?
There are 9 attendees. I don't know if any of them are here for this application, but if you do want to comment, you can use the raise hand function and we'll recognize you so you can speak.
You're kind of breaking up.
In the meantime, Mr. Chairman, Aaron Brown has his hand up.
Okay, Aaron?
I don't know how much you heard, but no attendees have their hand up. Did you hear me say that the attendees should use the raise hand function?
Yes.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, Dave, yes. You're coming through like a robot kind of.
Okay.
There are no attendees with their hands up. Okay.
Okay.
Aaron, your turn.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mr. Boyd to elaborate a little bit on his easement.
There are no attendees with their hands up, and Aaron Brown has his hand.
I'm going to text Dave that he needs to stop talking.
What was your question, Aaron?
Sorry, Henry. Hopefully you can hear me.
I didn't realize you guys had Stephen Hawking as your.
oh, that's a good one. The easement note that's on your plan, I was just curious if you could elaborate on that a little.
Yeah, so way back in time, this parcel, as it exists now, at 3.39 acres, is actually made up of 2 different sources of title. If you look, where there's basically in the middle of the back lot line, it says iron rod found, just a favor the left side a little bit, and there's a line that emanates from there and then goes to the street. It will say parcel 1 and parcel 2. Do you see that?
Yes, dotted. Yep.
So back in time, this was 2 different pieces, and across parcel 1, there was reserved a right of access to a parcel in the back across parcel 1. But it appears to me, and it's my opinion, that easement probably has been extinguished because there is absolutely no evidence that, certainly now, and I'm not sure there was evidence ever that it was used in the past. So we just put it on there just a note in the title so that when a title attorney looks at this, they can see that would alert them to that just as a precaution. But as I say, I don't think it's been, if it ever was used, I don't know, but it certainly hasn't been used based on the tree growth and the topography out there and everything else. It hasn't been used for decades.
Is there anything landlocked back there at all?
I don't think so, because the subdivision that's behind us, I looked on that and it didn't show any rights across Mr. Val's parcel, and they access actually through the gravel driveway that's to the east that I mentioned, that's east of Lot A. The only other piece, the town actually owns that piece that is to the left of us, right on the sharp curve there. That you get down and there's town land that's there.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Any other concerns or questions? No public? Dave, you said you had some, sure, comments regarding the approval? Because I think we're about that point.
I'm going to have to speak to do so. So I'll make it as quick as possible. 1, a DWG file of the plan shall be provided to the town planner showing all property lines and
Lang, this isn't going to work for the record.
It's not going to work.
Prior to signing final plans, this plan must be in NAD 1983 state plan.
Dave, this is not
2000 feet coordinates.
Dave, it's not working.
All monumentation.
Earth to Dave.
Dave, can you
All right.
mute yourself here and then call the meeting?
Aaron, do you have email? I'll send Aaron an email. Okay.
Okay. We'll stand ready.
That's what.
Whoever's running the tech on this, I wonder if you can send Dave the call-in information, and then he can watch the meeting on mute and talk.
Right. Talk on the phone. I've done that before when I got cut short.
Yeah.
He's going to take a picture. Send it to you, Aaron.
I don't. Okay, but it would be great to have him be able to answer questions.
How about Exeter TV Tech? Are you there?
I'm emailing him the call-in number right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see the typical conditions of approval in our packet. Do you?
No.
No. Because Dave always...
Henry, he didn't expect us to vote on you tonight.
Yeah, I think he did because I saw what he sent. I thought it was on the memo. I think it's on a package on you. I don't know. Maybe not.
Oh, he never...
I'm just teasing you, Henry.
I know. Of course you are.
Yes.
Thank you. You know how hypersensitive I am, Aaron. That's not fair.
Right.
Lang, I do not have email from David yet.
Okay. Let me... Maybe send it to me.
Oh, here he comes.
Nope.
I just requested that he just text me a photo. I have him on my cell.
Okay.
He's saying to have someone unmute him.
Yeah.
All right.
He can be on the phone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Here he is.
Okay.
Welcome back, Dave.
All right. Well, so I'll get right to it. 3 conditions. A DWG file of the plan shall be provided to the town planner showing all property lines and monumentation prior to signing the final plans. This plan must be in NAD 1983 State Plane, New Hampshire, FIPS 2800 feet coordinates. 2, all monumentation shall be set in accordance with section 9.25 of the site plan review and subdivision regulations prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the building. And the NHDOT driveway approval number shall be noted on the final plan.
Okay. Were there any other...
Lang, I'm ready to make a motion if you're ready.
I'm ready. As long as there were no other condition that... but I don't think there were any conditions that we came up with. So go ahead.
Okay. I move that the request of Patricia Duval, Planning Board case number 20-19 for minor subdivision approval be approved with the conditions as read by Town Planner Dave Sharples.
I second that. I second it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote as soon as I get my list. Okay. Molly, let's start with you, please.
I vote yes.
Pete Cameron,
Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
John Gruder,
Yes.
Jen Martell,
Yes.
Gwen English,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Unanimous vote. Approved.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yep. Thank you for coming and joining with us tonight.
I'm going to hang around, I think, so.
Okay, you're welcome to. All right, next, the application of Brian Gossett for review of a yield plan in conjunction with a proposed single-family condominium open space development and associated site improvement on property located off Tamard Lane and Cullen Way. Properties are located in the R1 low density and NP neighborhood professional zoning districts. Tax map parcel number S number 96-15 and 81-53. Planning board case number 20-2. And I'd like to have Dave start us off on this, please. You got to turn on your microphone or whatever you're using there, telephone, or get your tin can in order.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. The applicant submitted a yield plan in advance of an open space development plan as per section 7.71 of the zoning ordinance that states the dwelling unit density shall be determined using a yield plan, which shall be provided by the applicant and reviewed and accepted by the planning board prior to proposing an open space development plan. The applicant has appeared before the board on several occasions. At the September 10th, 2020 meeting, the planning board voted to accept the applicant's request for a yield plan approval of a 12-unit single-family open space development. Following the September 10th meeting, the applicant contacted me to discuss the discrepancy which arose at that meeting relative to the appropriate waiver criteria to be applied. The board reconsidered the waiver requests again at its October meeting and then voted once again to grant the waivers from section 9.6.2 to permit the encroachment of a proposed roadway entering the buffer strip and to deny the waiver from section 9.6.2 to permit encroachment of a portion of the lot number 5 that was within the buffer strip. And the applicant also provided a letter dated December 4th, 2020 that outlines the process. So so for brevity, I will refer you to that enclosed document, but I do have a couple of points to make. Essentially, this is the same yield plan that the board reviewed prior to the applicant revising the plan by removing any use of the Mendez property or the NP district. The only difference that I noted was that they have reconfigured lots 4 and 5 on the plan and reduced the lot count from 18 to 17. So the plan no longer requires a waiver from the perimeter buffer in the area of Cullen Way because the board, although not on this application, but they denied the previous waiver for that same request. So this plan no longer needs that. That's why the 18 lot plan, not quite a year ago not quite a year ago, was before you, is from 18 went down to 17. There was considerable information supplied by the applicant and the abutters over several meetings regarding the similar plan that is before you today, the 18 lot plan. Abutters were re-notified for the hearing, but the case number is the same, and I would consider that all prior submissions and testimony is part of this record. I also provided my June 4th, 2020 memo regarding the similar plan for your review in my packet. And as you will note in my June 4th, 2020 memo, I provide a waiver motion from section 7.13 that states the yield plan shall comply with conventional subdivision regulations and shall not require a variance from existing zoning ordinance in order to achieve the layout supporting the density. The board did feel a waiver from this section was required and voted as such at their May meeting, but then the applicant subsequently changed the plans, did not include the the Mendez property, so there was no transfer of density, and the variance question became moot, but it is back again, so the board felt that it was required, so I provided a motion for your convenience. And in the event the board decides to act on the application, I did provide also the yield plan motion as well in my memo. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Attorney Passay, you're ready tonight to start this off then, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Great. Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Happy New Year. Good evening to members of the board. I am Justin Passay from DTC Lawyers, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Brian Grisette, seeking approval of the revised 17-lot yield plan that we filed with the board back in December, and the single corresponding waiver from section 7.13 of the site plan review regulations to permit the use of the yield plan in front of you, which received variance from the town ZBA back in January of 2020. I'm joined tonight by Christian Smith of Beals Associates, who's of course the civil engineer on the project, and Brian Grisette. I plan to give just a quick introduction to orient the board to where we are in the process and what we are proposing. I'll then turn it over to Christian, who will discuss the current yield plan and answer any technical questions the board may have. And then I'll provide just a quick summary of the waiver from section 7.13 we are proposing. We have provided a full analysis of that waiver request in a letter dated 3 June, which we trust the board has reviewed in advance of this meeting. And just a few quick notes at the top, and this is really just for the benefit of any abutters who may be watching. I just want to confirm that this proposal, this yield plan before the board tonight, is just that. It's just a yield plan that we are proposing the board use to help establish the density for the open space development. And that open space development, as depicted on the site plans that we've previously filed with the planning board, is actually proposed to take place in that upland area adjacent to Graybridge Circle. So this is just a yield plan that we're here to talk about tonight. And I also just note at the top that we hope to have the opportunity to entertain any questions or comments from the board during the public hearing portion, so that we're not prevented from doing so in the event that unaddressed issues come up during the board's deliberations. As Dave said, for all intents and purposes, this yield plan before the board is the same as the one that we filed back in April of last year. The yield plan involves 3 properties to include the Grisette parcel in the R1 district, which is tax map 96 lot 15. That's the large parcel on the left side of the plan. The Mendez Trust parcel in the neighborhood professional district, which is tax map 81 lot 53, which is on the right side of the plan. And then the Brickyard Park property, which is owned by the town, which is depicted on the top of the plan, but which the Grisettes own the density rights to via a contract with the town from 1991, which we spent a lot of time talking about with the board. After our original filing last year, and frankly, in response to the opposition to the project, the yield plan was amended to not incorporate the Mendez Trust property and to avoid this variance issue altogether. That yield plan just utilized the Grisette property and the town property, and it depicted 12 lots. And while it required no waiver from section 7.13, it did require 2 waivers from the site plan review regulations, perimeter buffer requirement. And in September and October of last year, this board voted to approve that yield plan, but it denied the waiver request with regards to lot 5, which was formerly located at the bottom of the plan with frontage depicted on the Cullen Way extension. In light of the decision by the planning board, the Grisettes have returned to the original yield plan design with one exception. Recognizing the board's previous position on the lot 5 perimeter buffer waiver issue, we've removed lot 5 from the yield plan altogether. So that lot is no longer depicted and no waiver request is required. The resulting yield plan before you has been reviewed and approved by the TRC, and from our estimation meets all technical requirements of the regulations and is also viable and feasible under the site review regulations because it meets all of those regulations, as well as reasonably achievable, which is the standard which is outlined in the zoning ordinance. So with that brief overview, I'll turn it over to Christian, who's going to just walk through the yield plan a bit and answer any questions that the board may have, and then I'll pick it back up with the discussion about the waiver.
Thank you. Christian?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Christian Smith, engineer with Beals Associates, representing Brian Grissett on this. And I would ask permission to share screen, Mr. Chairman, so that I can go over the plan with you folks.
Please do.
Let me know when you can see that.
It's on my screen. Anybody
Okay,
else?
good. So again, as Justin mentioned, essentially the lots that appear on the Brickyard Recreation parcel and the Grissett parcel are virtually identical to what was approved back in September, aside from the elimination of Lot 5 over in this area. I know that's a reiteration. So this proposal essentially just incorporates the Mendez Trust property and provides 2 additional lots down in this location with the frontage off the Cullen Lane extension, and then 3 lots up in this location, which would take their drives off the existing drive, which provides the frontage and the access to the Brickyard commercial condominiums off of Kingston Road. And by and large, Mr. Chairman, that is the crux of the changes here. And as Justin alluded to, we have gone through TRC with this. We have dealt with, proving out the fact that it is financially feasible with TRC. And I guess with that, we will entertain any questions that the board may have for us.
Thank you. Questions on the part of the board? Aaron, you have a question. Your hand's up.
That's a holdover. Sorry, Lee.
Holdover, okay. Oops, should never have done that. It's going to be shrunk. There, okay. Comments?
Mr. Chairman, if there are no questions from the board, I'm happy to briefly summarize the waiver issue.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, thank you. So as I discussed at the top, the sole waiver that we're requesting is a waiver from that portion of section 7.13 of the regulations that states that a yield plan shall not require a variance from existing zoning ordinances in order to achieve the layout supporting the proposed density. As this board, I'm sure, remembers, the Grisetts did in fact receive a variance back in January of last year to use this precise yield plan to support the Grisetts' proposed open space development. We've previously provided the entirety of the ZBA record to you and had lengthy discussions with you about the impact and implications of that variance relief. As I tried to highlight in our December letter, that variance came after really months of coordination and collaboration with the town, to include multiple meetings with town staff in the summer of 2019, a preliminary consultation with this board in September of 2019, an administrative decision from Doug Eastman that stated, among other things, that we could use this yield plan for our open space development if we obtained a variance, and our receipt of a special exception from the ZBA to depict residential uses in the Mendez Trust property. From the beginning, our position has been that this language in 713 doesn't apply to us, because our position is that it applies prospectively, meaning it applies to yield plans that would require variance relief to use, not yield plans which have already obtained variance relief. In other words, one can't present a yield plan to the planning board to establish density for an open space development if that yield plan would require a variance to use in real life. That's just common sense. The yield plan that's approved by the planning board has to be reasonably achievable under the ordinance, and it has to be feasible and viable under the regulations. And a yield plan that requires a variance relief is none of those things. Despite our position, though, at the planning board approved a motion back in May that stated that we needed a waiver from this section. So on 3 June, we provided a very comprehensive analysis outlining the basis for our waiver request. And that letter incorporated the entire ZBA record into the record of this case. And then we discussed that at length during the June meeting. The June meeting did not reach a deliberation on this issue. And thereafter, as Dave noted, we pivoted to the second iteration of the yield plan. We understand that at approximately the same time, the planning board received legal advice from town council regarding this waiver request, and we trust that our interpretation is consistent with the interpretation that's been provided to you by town council. We really don't intend to rehash our entire argument, because we've already made the argument to you And that's why we requested in our December letter that this board refresh its recollection of our June letter. Suffice it to say, though, our position now is consistent with what we previously wrote to you in June and what we previously argued to you in June. The yield plan before you tonight is feasible, viable, and reasonably achievable. We have specific variance relief from the ZBA to use this yield plan. We have a special exception from the ZBA to depict residential uses on the Mendez Trust property. Those approvals are the law of this case as they were not appealed. 713, the section here, is intended to apply to yield plans that require variance relief and not those which already obtained it. And we plainly meet the criteria of the waiver provisions of the site review regulations in section 13.7. And to very briefly summarize those, first, the granting of the waiver will not be detrimental to the public safety, health, welfare, or injurious to property because it will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the public health as evidenced by the granting of the variance by the ZBA. This yield plan depicts large R1 style lots which are totally consistent with the surrounding area and are allowed by right under the zoning ordinance and by virtue of our special exception. This development is further consistent with the master plan, which envisions that these two properties, the Grisette property and the Mendez Trust property, provide a transitional area between the more dense downtown area and the more rural area to the west. Additionally, as depicted in the variance materials we have provided to you, the appraisal document of Brian White of White Appraisal clearly indicates that there will be no detrimental impact to surrounding property occasioned by the depicted yield plan development. Finally, the Grisette property proposal contemplates the conveyance of the entirety of the Mendez Trust property, which is over 30 acres, to the town, which is a huge public benefit. So we would suggest that that first waiver criteria is met. Second, the conditions upon which the request for a waiver is based are unique to the property for which the waiver is sought and are not applicable generally to other property because the Grisette proposal utilizes two very large undeveloped parcels which are larger than the rest of the parcels around them and are burdened by wetlands which make development a challenge. Additionally, the Mendez Trust property is zoned NP, but it's landlocked. It has no frontage, which makes use of that very difficult under the zoning ordinance. Based on these unique characteristics, the Grisettes obtained a variance and satisfied the hardship criteria to proceed with this open space development using this yield plan. The proposal here really constitutes the best possible proposal for the and use of these properties in light of their challenging and unique physical characteristics. Number three, because of the particular physical surroundings, shape, or topographical conditions of the specific property involved, a particular hardship to the owner would result as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of these regulations are carried out, because if the planning board denies the waiver request, it essentially obviates the constitutional variance relief that we obtained from the ZBA, which recognized the unique nature of these property. As I said, these properties are burdened by the special conditions which make them development of them a challenge. And this proposal, inclusive of the open space development on the uplands area of the Grisette parcel and the conveyance of the entire Mendez Trust property to the town, is the best possible use of the properties in light of their unique character. Number four, the granting of the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of these regulations because the proposal is not even inconsistent with the express provisions of Section 7.13 itself. As we have stated, we read Section 7.13 as applying to yield plans which require variance relief, not yield plans which have specific variance relief to be used already. Our proposal is really no different than an applicant who obtains a frontage variance from the ZBA before coming to the planning board for a minor subdivision. We comply with all technical criteria of the regulations, which has been confirmed by the TRC and by town staff as well. Were we not pursuing an open space development, which is required here under the regulations by virtue of the size of the properties involved, we could proceed with permitting this exact plan. Any interpretation of Section 7.13 that would prohibit the Grisette's use of this yield plan would, I think, defy the common sense and defy the ZBA relief that the Grisettes obtained at the recommendation of the town. Finally, the waiver will not in any manner vary the provisions of the zoning ordinance or master plan because this exact yield plan to obtain blanket variance relief from the entirety of Article 7 of the zoning ordinance, which is the open space development article, and Article 4 of the zoning ordinance, which is the density and dimensional regulations, and it obtained a special exception for the residential use in the MP district. So this proposal Not only is it consistent with the surrounding properties, it's certainly consistent with the zoning and has all permits essentially to proceed. The yield plan also depicts very conservative residential development, which is consistent with the surrounding area. And as depicted on the yield plan, the open space development itself is consistent with the express language of the master plan, which, as I've already referenced, indicates that these parcels should be used as a transitional zone between the downtown and the area to the west, which is more rural. So finally, in addition to all of that, in addition to all of our filings, we've provided you a detailed financial estimate regarding the cost to develop and the construction cost to develop and subdivide the road, to create Cullen Way Extension, to construct all the associated drainage and utility infrastructure to include water and sewer. It accounts for the 3 minor wetland crossings, which are depicted, in the construction of retaining walls and the construction of the extended driveways. And this was initially included back in February of 2020. It was updated again in May of 2020. And frankly, in the age of COVID, and as many of you likely know, property values all around town and around the region continue to go up. So we stand on these estimates, which depicted that all of these things and all of these improvements could be accomplished and still provide a reasonable financial yield to Mr. Grisette, such that from a financial perspective, this proposal is totally viable and reasonably achievable and feasible too. So our conclusion is just that on all of this information, the yield plan before you is reasonably achievable under the zoning ordinance and is feasible and viable. I think the Grisettes have really made every effort to comply with the requests and the instructions of the town over the last couple of years. And we would really love to move forward to site review on this project and feel like we're well situated to do just that in light of the plan before you, which in our estimation complies with in all respects with the town's technical subdivision regulations. So we ask that the board approve this yield plan tonight. And of course, as always, we appreciate your time. We're happy to field any questions that you may have about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Comments, concerns? Gwen?
Hello. Okay. Yeah, Lang. Just before that, it's hard for me now to keep track of the hands and unmute and mute myself because of the setup. So if you can keep track of the hands, and I do notice the attendees' hands will go up. I think one's up already. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll need the attendees. Yes. Okay. Gwen, you had your hand up. There you are.
Oh, yeah, there I am. I guess I'm going to put out a disclaimer before I make the comment. And I just have to say it has been absolutely exhausting going through all of the legal aspects of this, all of the engineering aspects of this. And when I got this plan and saw in the notes that it was similar to with a few minor changes similar to the last plan, my thought went to the last plan that we saw, which was very different from this. And when I reviewed it a little bit more and then realized that, no, this was a plan from earlier in the year, it was almost overwhelming for me to go back and start reading all the notes that accompanied this plan. But I have to say that my feeling about this particular layout has not changed. And I know you've done looked at it from a financial perspective, and you gave us as many details, I guess, as you could for what makes this a reasonable plan from a financial perspective. I can't help but look at particularly the extension on Cullen Way and see a new cul-de-sac, about 1,100 feet of roadway, mainly put in to give access to those two houses that are 50 feet away from a railroad. I just don't see that as being a financially reasonable plan. You're going through, I think it's about 300 feet in a flood zone, about 100 feet in a wetland. The expense of putting in a road and a new cul-de-sac. I don't know what you're looking at for a potential price tag on those two houses, but I don't see those as being desirable properties that I would think you would have to put a big price tag on in order to make it worthwhile to build that road. And, it's a little bit easier to understand it on the road coming in off of Route 111 for those three houses that are up there. But again, that's about 1,200 feet of roadway. It's about 1,100 or 1,000, I guess, just to get to the first house. But in total, it'll be about 1,200 feet, which is not an inexpensive proposition. I know we talked about getting granted driveway cuts for the other three houses. Those were in the previous plan, but are you optimistic that I know this is just a yield plan, but are you optimistic that you could get another driveway cut for those three houses that you were proposing in this particular plan? I know we've talked about transition areas. When this is all said and done, this is going to be kind of a high density property. And I'm not sure that I totally agree with this as being an ideal development and have it be considered as a nice transition from what you see in town to what you see off Tamarin Lane and Cullen Way. That's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, we can respond to that, or I'm happy to. We can take all sort of comments, and then address them all at the end. However you prefer to proceed.
Go ahead and respond to Gwen at this point.
Okay.
Please.
Well, I appreciate it, Gwen. I appreciate your comments, and I understand the perspective. I think in response, I would just say that, the analysis that was provided by Gov Group back in February and then updated again in May took into account the long driveways for what was then lots 6 and 7, but which is now lots 5 and 6. And, depicted reduced values for those lots. It was 125,000 is what they predicted. That's what the analysis says in reflection really of their location and the long driveway. I would note that, they're not dissimilar from existing lots on Cullen Way. And as you can see on the plan, properties, which are located with some proximity to the railroad that you referenced. And certainly the financial analysis that we provided accounted for the cost to do those driveways. And when you consider where property values are going, we're aware of at least three lots on Kingston Road that were the subject of a current approval before the planning board, which are on Kingston Road itself and are substantially similar to these lots, in fact, smaller than these lots, and they're being posted for $275,000 a piece. So when you take in consideration that our analysis contemplates a very conservative value on this, and when you consider further that the yield from the whole plan is consistent with a viable project, I think that's the standard. I recognize that you may not find this plan ideal, I think, which is the word you use, but that's just really not the standard. The standard is whether or not it's feasible and viable, and these lots comply with the technical requirements of the town. You had another question about three lots and driveway cuts. I think you might be referencing 12, 13, and 14 off of Route 11. Is that correct?
Glenn?
It's very dark in here, so it's the one that has it's the driveway access easement. So it's on the Mendez property.
I see. So that's over the Brickyard condominium. Yeah, I mean, I think as depicted, that we do think that that's viable. It's a right-of-way access, but again, it's not anything that is contrary to the existing regulations. And for those reasons, and in light of the sort of supervailing considerations about the real estate market right now, not just in COVID, but generally in Exeter, we think these are totally viable lots.
Okay. All set there. Peter Steckler, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've got a question about that, the new Lot 5, and it's hard to see on the plan we received in our packets, the flood zone line, and I'm wondering if Mr. Smith could put that up and zoom into that. I guess my concern is around putting driveways through flood zones. If that's the case, I can't really tell if that driveway intersects or is within a flood zone. Could you please zoom into that? And
sure, Christian.
We're getting there.
So can you highlight what line is the flood zone line and where
the flood zone line, Peter, is this heavy dash dot line. I know it gets lost with all the wetland setbacks and whatnot, but I'm chasing my mouse around it right now.
Okay.
And that is where the flood line crosses 5 and 6.
And is the flood zone to the south of that line or to the north?
No, it's to the north of that line, in the direction of the wetland. If I pan down a little, you can see this is the brook, the center line of the brook, and that's what the floodplain is associated with.
Okay, so that road is within a flood zone.
A portion of it is, yes.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I'd just express that my concern, given our, concerns about flood risk and looking to reduce our community's flood risks and reducing people's isolation during flood events, emergency access, that sort of thing. That's a concern to me, and I think it's at the viability of that roadway configuration, and then maybe more significantly than that, tied to the regulations, and it has to do with waiver number 13.7.4. The granting of the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulations. And I guess based on my read of the regulations of 7.1.3, I know we've been through this again, is that the yield plan shall comply with conventional subdivision regulations and shall not require a variance. I know Attorney Passé's opinion is, well, if you've already got the variance, you're exempt from this. That's my layperson's non-attorney understanding of that perspective. I guess for me, I still don't really, that argument doesn't win the day based on this pretty clear statement for me. So I'm not a voting member tonight. I won't get to vote on this. So the chair asked for those of us to express our concerns, and that's one of my concerns, is that I see, based on my interpretation of 7.1.3, a waiver is not eligible based on 13.7.4. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that comment too, Mr. Steckler. And I guess the way that we look at this and the way that we think about this is from a foundational perspective. Yield plans, as we know, are designed to establish density. If we were to, under the regulations, we're required to propose open space without relief from the planning board based on how big these parcels are. But putting that issue aside, the Grisettes could propose this precise subdivision tomorrow, and there would be nothing from a regulatory perspective that would prevent approval, because this yield plan depicts lots which conform in all regards with the technical requirements of the town. So when you consider the purposes of yield plan, and you consider you consider that this yield plan could be approved tomorrow because it's compliant with the regulations, it's hard to justify why a regulation like 7.13 would function to prevent its use, because it's totally viable. This land, these 50 odd acres of property, can accommodate the 17 lots that are depicted. Most of these lots are substantially larger than what is required in the R1. So the land can accommodate the lots. The conventional subdivision could be approved, and for those reasons, it's reasonably achievable. I mean, it has the variance, it has the special exception from the ZBA, so it's reasonably achievable, and it has to be feasible and viable because it doesn't contravene any of the town's regulations.
And I'd just like to follow that up, Mr. Chairman, to point out that, you know, it is allowed in the regulations to cross wetlands as well as flood zones to get to buildable upland areas. You know, with regard to the flood zone, there would very likely be compensatory mitigation. In other words, you would create flood storage that would be displaced by the construction of the driveway. And, you know, obviously the driveway would be constructed at an elevation that would be well above and outside the 100-year floodplain. That's a point that I just wanted to get into the record.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I guess I just want to say, I understand what Attorney Passay is saying, is that you could propose this subdivision today or tomorrow and get it approved and build it if you could. But I guess what my challenge is, as a board member or as an alternate, if I were a voting member tonight, is you'd be asking me, using that rationale, to vote against the regulations that are on the books. And that's what our charge is, to follow the regulations on the books, whether sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't. And I've been up against that myself as a board member, but this one's pretty clear cut. And so we'd be approving a waiver, I think, that really goes directly against, very black and white, what's on the books that we're supposed to be following. So thank you.
Well, I would just encourage the board to consider, you know, I've spoken a lot with Walter Mitchell about this issue. I know that he's provided an opinion to the board. Frankly, I think, you know, Dave, I'm not sure if you have an interpretation you want to share here. I don't think that it's black and white. And I think just a logical reading of this is that a subdivision regulation promulgated by the planning board can't function to trump a constitutional safety valve, you know, sort of relief from the ZBA in the form of a variance. That's just inconsistent with New Hampshire law.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have Mr. Grisette here would like to make a statement, if that's okay.
Yes, please. Mr. Grisette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to Mr. Steckler and on the issue of the floodplain issue, I guess when you're saying contrary to the ordinance, I would disagree. And I guess the best way to, as an example, if we reverted back to the 13-lot yield plan, and we developed the Mendez Trust parcels separately, the zoning ordinances regarding floodplains allow access through floodplain to reach the upland areas. So it could be, and the board is required to allow that access. It's not contrary to the ordinance because you wrote it, that we could provide access to the upland areas on the Mendez Trust property. The question is, would you like a commercial development back there? Would you like a multifamily, multi-use development back there, which would have much greater impact than what we're proposing? In fact, what we're proposing is to minimize the impact totally on the Mendez Trust property and to minimize and eliminate in the final site plan all impacts on those wetlands in that floodplain area. So, but the choice is, under the ordinance for the floodplain, we have the legal right to develop those uplands and cross floodplain following the mitigation efforts that would be required. So as a reason to say it does not comply with the waiver based on the spirit of the ordinance, we disagree. And I hope that clarifies it so everybody understands we're trying to do the least impact possible in compliance with the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen, you have your hand up.
Sorry, I think I answered my own question, so.
Okay.
I forgot to put it down.
Dave, do you see anybody in the public?
Mr. Chair, there are 2 attendees with their hands up. That I see.
2.
3.
Are they?
So Ann Flattery, Laura Knott, and Mark Page.
All right.
Dave, I think you're muted. I'm not sure if you're trying to speak.
No, he's not trying to speak.
Hi, Exeter TV. These people are all from in and around Exeter, so good to go on any of them.
Okay.
Shall I let the first one talk and Flaherty?
Yes, please.
All right.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Ann. Yes.
Okay, great. This is Ann Flaherty from 8 Tamarind Lane. And my husband, Patrick, has spoken previously on this, well, the yield plan that was very similar to this one. And I know that Dave said that the former record is all part of this, but just to reiterate, from our perspectives as the abutters at 8 Tamarind Lane, we are in support of this yield plan, including the waiver. And my husband has already gone into detail on it, so I don't want to get too much more in depth other than to say that, again, we're in support of it. And also to note, in case the question arises, that there is a recognized right-of-way access for some of the properties across our property. So I think then it's for, I think, like 7, 8, 9, and 10 on this, as the lots depicted in this yield plan. So that is an existing right-of-way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, who's next? EXTV.
I think they've asked me to speak, or they asked me to unmute, so I think I'm able to be next.
You're it, Laura. Okay,
thank you. Hi, I'm Laura Knott. I've spoken before. I am at 15 Tamarind Lane in Exeter. So I was pretty dismayed when I saw this proposal as well. So I took some time and I wrote up a letter which I have submitted to Dave Sharples, and I didn't do it until tonight, so I apologize. The board has not had a chance to read that, I'm sure. So I will read the letter that I wrote to you tonight.
Okay.
Over the last year and a half, the planning board, Mr. Gassett, and Attorney Passay have debated this issue of how many homes can be placed on this parcel of R1 low-density residential land. Every time Mr. Gassett receives approvals, he then either confuses the issue by requesting additional or unnecessary approvals, changing the plan, or both. In this case, he is changing the plan yet again. Mr. Grissett has stated from the beginning the reason for him attempting to develop this land now, after owning it for over 30 years, is to pay for family medical bills. If he in fact needs this money and actually wants to develop this property, you would think he would accept the approvals he's already been granted to date and move on with the project development cycles. Instead, he keeps coming back to the planning board asking for more. Attorney Passe's letter portrays a sob story of short deadlines and quick turnarounds required by Mr. Grissett in order to meet the hearing deadlines. His letter also implies that the opposition of neighbors is completely meritless. Opposition, collaboration, discussion, and compromise are what democracy and politics are all about. Despite what he may try to portray, Mr. Grissett has made no real attempt to negotiate or come to a realistic compromise with the neighborhood over the last year and a half, and has only upped the level of distrust and animosity for himself and his family. Mr. Grissett was granted authority to build 12 single-family homes in an open space subdivision. Isn't that enough? Mr. Grissett is claiming it is not financially viable to build, quote unquote, only the 12 lots granted instead of the 13 he requested. Apparently, 13 lots were enough for his project to remain financially viable, so why now is he seeking to build 17 lots instead? This effort severely taxes the R1 land on which these homes will be built beyond its reasonable capacity. I'd like to read the variance and special exceptions that were granted to Mr. Grissett on January 21st, 2020. The variance request that was granted was, quote, to permit a single-family open space development in the R1 low-density residential zoning district, which draws density from the contiguous unimproved property in the NP neighborhood professional zoning district, as presented in case 19-19. The special exception application that was granted was to depict residential uses in the NP district on the yield plan in case number 19-18. The variance and special exception Mr. Grissett were granted on January 21st, 2020 were specific to the yield plan presented at that time, which I'd like to note has now changed 3 times, and to those particular case numbers, number 19-18 and 19-19. These are different case numbers than the case number 20-2 that we're now discussing, as well as the yield plan that Mr. Grissett is now proposing. Those granted approvals were specific to that yield plan presented at that time, and as such, the planning board would need to now approve yet another variance and special exception for this current yield plan and current case number. This is an excellent opportunity for the planning board to reconsider the rationale provided by Attorney Britton at the June and July 2020 hearings. I urge the planning board members to review Attorney Britton's letter dated June 10th, 2020. Attorney Britton made the case that, number 1, the Zoning Board of Adjustment does not have the authority to transfer density. On this, Attorney Britton wrote, quote, New Hampshire law provides for a number of innovative land use controls that a town may adopt. See RSA 674-21. Among these possible innovative land use controls is the ability to allow for the transfer of density and development rights, such as involved in the Grissett Yield Plan. The innovative land use controls may include, but do not necessarily include, the ability to allow the transfer of density. Innovative land use controls may only be adopted through the town meeting process for adoption or amendment of a zoning ordinance. In other words, the adoption of innovative land use controls, such as density transfers, is a legislative decision, not an administrative or quasi-judicial decision, and is outside of the authority of the ZBA. The Town of Exeter zoning ordinance lacks any provision allowing for density transfer. Therefore, the ZBA has not been granted authority to transfer density, whether by variance or otherwise. And then Attorney Britton also made the case that the yield plan violates Section 713 of the site plan regulations. On this subject, Attorney Britton wrote, quote, Section 713 of the site plan regulations provides that the yield plan shall comply with conventional subdivision regulations and shall not require a variance from existing zoning ordinances in order to achieve the layout supporting the proposed density. The purpose of a yield plan is to allow the planning board to compare the density of an open space development to the density that would be permitted by a conventional subdevelopment on the same lot, absent any variances or other special treatment. The yield plan presented today has these same deficiencies. It relies on transferring density to the Grissett property from two other lots, requiring innovative land use control that has not been adopted by the town of Exeter. Separately, regardless of density transfers, the proposed yield plan requires a variance from section 7.5.3 of the ordinance and therefore violates section 713 of the site plan regulations. This yield plan should not be granted any special exceptions or variances and should be firmly rejected tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there's a third person.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Mark, yes.
Hi, Mark Page. I live on Tamarind Lane. I'm not going to belabor too many of the points. Laura kind of made those, but I just, as a technical matter, I want to be sure that that the record, Dave had noted in his memo that he considers all the other submissions as part of this record, even though they came under other case numbers, as Laura alluded to. And specifically, I think it's important to note for the board, and I think Gwen English had alluded to this point, that it's a pretty complicated record. Some of the objections that Laura had raised to, that Attorney Britton had raised, that Laura had mentioned, include the transfer of density without the enabling legislation. And then the one other point that I think also I encourage the board to review again as they go through the file is the contract between the town and Brickyard Pond that Attorney Britton had also addressed in terms of whether or not that was a valid contract or not. So I guess that what I'm saying is I want to be sure that all of those other objections are part of this record. And I think Dave had said that, but I want to make sure that that's clear, Mr. Chairman, to you and to the board, and that there is a very complicated legal nature to this. And I'm guessing that the town council's memo, although I haven't seen it, alludes to this, that this is not a cut and dry. It's not meritless claims. In fact, there are a lot of claims running around here that are worth the board's consideration. So I'm just encouraging the board, hopefully, to reconsider and review those complicated legal issues. And then finally, on a more, and I'm not a land use guy, but I am wondering the extent to which those lots, to shift gears a little bit here to the current yield plan, the lots, I think 4 and 5 that board members Steckler and Gwen English had pointed out are the ones on Cullen. And some of the filings from the applicant describe the Mendez property as, quote, largely undevelopable. And then at various hearings, we hear how they potentially are viable lots or that a commercial building could be put there. So I'm curious as to the inconsistency in those filings. And I think that that's something that I hope the board will consider as they go through a pretty voluminous record that's been established. So that's all I have. And I appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. Dave, you got any comments upon the comments or guidance?
No, I can answer any questions anybody has for me. Otherwise, I don't have anything to add at this point. I mean, if the board, whatever the board wants, I will happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we're also happy to just in 1 minute provide a response to some of the comments that were just made.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so just to clarify any confusion, this issue regarding the case numbers, I mean, this case before the planning board only has one case number. It's case number 20-2. I suppose that means it was the second case that was filed for the planning board back in 2020. The planning board is distinct from the ZBA. The case numbers at the ZBA that apply to the underlying relief that we obtained there in January have a 19 in them, and that's because we filed that relief in 2019. So I'm not sure what the point was that was being made about case numbers, but certainly our position is that all of the information provided to the planning board since April of last year in case number 20-2 before the planning board is part of the record of this case. And I think ultimately that's what the gentleman was trying to confirm anyways. This yield plan is the same yield plan that was reviewed by the ZBA minus one lot on the Grisette property side. So it is the same yield plan that was reviewed and approved and is totally applicable in this case. The other legal issues that were raised by the participants just now have been addressed. Attorney Britton, who I understand is not here, advised this board that despite Attorney Britton advised this board that it should ignore a variance, ignore a special exception, and ignore an administrative decision which his clients did not appeal. And then he advocated that the planning board void a 30-year-old contract between the Grisettes and the town, which his clients have no standing to enforce. They're silly legal arguments. I know that the town council has provided an opinion regarding those arguments. I trust that they're consistent with what we've told you, which is that they're irrelevant for the planning board's consideration here. And we hope that the planning board treats them as such.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Just I'll follow up on that. I noted the case number, but yeah, the case number has been the same, and it is my opinion, and what I'm hearing, none of the board's objecting, that the file is entirely on this case. All the previous information that was submitted is part of this file. It's just a continuation of the same plan, in my opinion. So it is all included.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that clarity.
And you will note, just on a sidebar, about the transfer, using the recreation land, the Brickyard Park land,
yes,
in this yield plan. I mean, I just wanted to point out that the board did use that. That was used in the yield plan that the board accepted. So when they added the Mendez property, it added the couple of things about the variance and the waiver from that 7.13, but it didn't add that issue. That issue, survived and was part of the board's deliberations for the ultimately 12 lot accepted yield plan.
Thank you. Yep. Any other questions or thoughts? Are we satisfied with the testimony that Attorney Basse has given us for the yield plan waiver motion? Do we want to deal with that? How would you like to proceed?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Cameron.
I guess I'm supposed to, by virtue of the fact that I went to law school 50 some odd years ago, to be able to interpret all of this. But I guess I'm coming down to not really appreciating the fact that, and this maybe that I just don't understand, but it has been represented tonight that a subdivision plan would waltz through us to a favorable determination on behalf of the applicant. I'm a little concerned that such an issue would, and those are my words, waltz through. We would still have an independent right to look at that full yield, not the yield plan, but the full site plan. But I guess that I don't want us to make an assumption that that's a fait accompli. This is admittedly, this is something we've seen before, but I unfortunately don't have every single one of those maps before me to really be sure that in fact this is what we've seen before. I don't recall it, but that doesn't mean anything. I think just as an aside, the length of the Cullen Way extension is troubling. So that I'm not necessarily prepared to conclude, as we've been advised, that hey, you'd have to approve this kind of a thing on a site full site plan. I want to think about that a little bit before I fully vote here.
I agree with you. We've been looking at this as a yield plan, not as a full-blown proposal. So I hear what you're saying, Pete. I would take a different look at some of the aspects of it if it was becoming before us as a proposed subdivision. Spread out as it is, I guess you still would call it a subdivision, basically being on fairly common land, at least land all under one particular owner.
And I would like to point out that if it was a subdivision, it would have a lot more detail than the yield plan. It needs,
absolutely,
stormwater and analysis and final grading and road profiles and stations.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you can get there on this, but that's not the standard for a yield plan. We don't require those things of a yield plan.
Exactly. And that's
but also, wanted to mention an attendee has their hand up under the name David Haddon.
Okay. Could we hear? I don't see David on the screen, but can we have him tuned in, please? Or connected?
Can you hear me?
I see the name. Can you speak up a little? Yeah, okay.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, David, thank you.
Good. Hey, thank you very much for the ability to speak. I live at 12 Tamarind with my family. And I just wanted to go on the record to say that we are opposed to this. Again, I'm just kind of trying to get my head around a lot of this. There's a lot of shiny objects and bouncing balls, in my opinion. But I do appreciate the board taking the time they are to look at this. And I just did want to go on the record that saying myself and my family at 12 Tamarind do personally oppose this.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Aaron, yes.
Oh.
Thanks, Lang. Dave, are you able to speak? Because I had a couple questions I wanted to bring up to you.
Yeah, through the phone.
That'll work. Can you surmise, because I have to echo Gwen English's comments at the beginning of this continued hearing tonight, that this is one of the more complicated cases that I have encountered on this board, and I've been on it for a couple of years now. And the gyrations of it have been fairly dramatic, and I think I've made every meeting on this and have stayed, I feel, abreast of it, and I still find it pretty complicated.
Yes.
Given the remote nature of how we're operating, I think makes it even more difficult. And looking at a small plan with dozens of lines going through it makes it hard to really analyze. Can you surmise the difference between what we're looking at today and the plan that we approved 12 lots on? What are we really considering this again as a yield plan? What's making it different that we should truly rethink what we already voted on?
Well, essentially, it added back the Mendez property. The yield plan you accepted with the 12 lots only included the Mendez property in the R1. I mean, the Grissett property. And the Mendez property was taken out. This one includes the Mendez property, which includes basically lot 5, 6, and then 15, 16, and 17?
Yes. Yep.
So basically, if you add the 12 lots and then plus the 5 that are now part of the Mendez property.
Okay, but I thought on the 12 lot approval, there was the understanding that the Menendez property would be in conservation. Am I not getting that right?
That's not how I remember. It was just a conventional subdivision. There's no open space requirements. They removed that property out of the proposal, but I'll let the applicant, they should be able to.
I just be in a board discussion at the moment, but all right. So the big difference then is really just adding the additional land and then what that brings about. So that's the reason it's appropriate for us to potentially have another vote.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you originally looked at both properties, the Mendez and the Grissett property together, and then based on some arguments that were raised, the applicant chose, the board never acted on it, but the applicant chose to remove the Mendez property. So then went forward with the 13 lots. You eventually accepted it as 12 lots because you denied the waiver. But then now they're coming back and saying, okay, let's go back to the original plan they submitted. So it's a different application. I mean, not per se.
So that's one of my points, Dave. I understand that we're trying to continue this, but if someone adds this amount of acreage to an application, I tend to think it's like a whole new application, not the same case. We already voted on a yield plan under this case number. And now you're adding significant acreage and asking us to increase the yield by almost 50%. And it feels to me like it's a new application.
I would agree with you if they came forward with just the Grissett property originally and asked for 13 lots, and then you added this, and then got accepted, board adjudicated it, and then added this. But they came in with this. This isn't added. It was just they originally proposed it.
It's added since we voted. We voted on a yield plan. Yeah, under this case number, we voted on a yield plan.
Yes, you did.
So I have a problem with a second bite at the apple under the same case number. I truly do. And don't think I'm that technical about stuff. I try to go with the intent, but I do think it adds a hell of a lot of confusion to this board and to the public.
I completely agree with you, Aaron. I feel like I have to start all over again. And that's an overstatement. I don't, but I feel like I need to go through the volumes of paperwork and notes that I am asked during any number of these presentations and try to cobble together what goes with which plan, where our arguments were, what the neighborhood's arguments were. It's really overwhelming. And this is not a small deal. This is a plan that's going to have a major impact, I feel, on the neighborhood. And I don't take making a decision on this lightly. I mean, they've also spent a lot of money trying to sift through all this on a legal front, and they've spent money and time trying to figure out the engineering aspects of it. And this is a lot on our backs, and it kind of feels like a new plan tonight, looking at this with all these different houses, different configurations.
Aaron, if I may, I think we're talking about two different things. The process, the planning board can do as you wish with that and decide how you want to proceed. But I did seek legal counsel, I did talk to them about this very same issue. And what they told me that, due to the similarity to the plan, if we tried to assign it a new case number, well, we could and say, okay, that's been adjudicated. This is a new one. She felt any judge would include the previous record in it. She was confident that, you couldn't separate the two. It's the same plan that it was originally submitted. So that was just going off of that. But moving forward, I don't know. I'll take the board's direction and try.
I appreciate your sharing that, Dave. That's good to hear. It's just I think that it I don't know. This has the feeling to me, and this will be really simplified, but if one of my kids comes to me and I say no, they go to my wife to see if they can hear yes. Yep. And that's just what it feels like. We're going to a second vote on a yield plan. They didn't like the way it went the first time, so let's add this piece in. And I don't know. It doesn't feel good to me, and I don't typically say that at all.
I'll just add with, just look for the direction, what the board wants to go, and I'll try to accommodate that. Just my understanding, the board never reached a position on the first one. It was the applicant that changed the plan voluntarily, but now has come back for the original, basically what he originally submitted for. I understand it's confusing. If the board needs more time and wants more information, just let me know what you need, and I will get it to you.
Well, it's different in that it's adding structures to the plan that we had made a decision on. I think that's part of the confusion. So it's maybe modifying. I'm trying to figure out, put it in my mind. It's modifying a plan that we dealt with already to better meet developers' vision. Because I think the yield plan is partly a vision of it that the folks have. And try to get the land to serve or to be involved in that process. I don't know. But I agree that it is because of its similarity. Maybe it is a different case, but I'm not sure that it is. And Dave points out that more than likely the judge would say, hey, wait a minute, all this previous work is part of this plan, like it or lump it. So I'm really not sure whether we need more time to think about it or what questions we have about it. I mean, some of the questions and concerns we have certainly been voiced tonight, but there's answers to those concerns.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I guess that I would just say on behalf of the applicant tonight that we appreciate these comments and we acknowledge how complicated it is and we acknowledge the complexity of the legal arguments that have been made here. And I guess what I would say is it's been this board's practice, as I understand it, to treat and address yield plans in an evolving way. Yield plans are frequently revised and brought back to the planning board. I'm thinking most recently of Rose Farm, which had several iterations of the yield plan, some of which were changed at the request of the planning board, some of which were changed at the behest of the opposition in that case, which drew attention to certain components. But my understanding in talking to town staff and even with talking to Attorney Mitchell is that the town has treated these quote unquote acceptances of yield plans, not as approvals, and has even gone as far as to reserve the right to go back and revisit a yield plan later on once site review or subdivision has started in earnest. So I would say that these iterations are consistent with what's happened in the past in Exeter. And I would say, really, as Dave said, we're back to the original plan, and there was one intervening plan in the middle. And I appreciate the amount of time that's gone by. And frankly, I appreciate the other comments that have been made tonight, and particularly by Mr. Cameron. We don't mean to suggest that what's depicted on this yield plan would waltz through an approval with the planning board. All we mean to suggest is that there's a process in place. When you file a yield plan, you've got to go to TRC. The town engineer has got to review it. The town staff, Dave Sharples, has got to review it too. That process generates a memo usually, as Dave re-included in the package for tonight. The standard we're dealing with is whether or not what's depicted on the yield plan is reasonably achievable. The standard isn't whether everyone likes it or whether it would absolutely be approved. The standard is whether or not it's reasonably achievable and whether or not it's feasible and viable. The only means by which the planning board has to make that determination is to look at the plan and determine whether or not it complies with the regulations. If it complies with the regulations and it's financially viable and feasible, as we've indicated it is, then I would submit that it's the obligation of the board to approve the yield plan and move forward to site plan. If there are specific issues with the yield plan, insofar as conflict between what's depicted and what's allowed under the regulations, well, then that's something we should talk about. But if that, in the absence of that, I see the path for the planning board as being fairly clear. And that's all we're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, point well taken. It's a fluid process, so to speak. And I would say probably every time we've dealt with yield plans over the years, you don't come up, well, even with any plan, you'll never end up with what you started with. Typically, you end up with a better plan.
And this process
so
has
been...
been...
more discussion yet, or are we still open?
Well, the public has spoken, and I can certainly close that portion of the meeting. Unless...
Before you do, Mr. Chairman, there is a hand up. I don't know if it's a new hand from Mr. Haddon or it's a leftover, but there is still one hand up from an attendee just before you close the public hearing. Just wanted you to know that.
Okay, thank you. I don't know where you see the hands, but at any rate.
It shows that David Haddon has his hand up, which might be left over line, but maybe he can speak if he wants.
Okay.
And also Laura Knott put her hand up just now. Now she's the only one with her hand up.
I don't see those hands on my thing, but go ahead.
They're both up right now. Again.
Now, yeah, one went up. All
right. Well, let's. I'll give David Haddon the floor if he'd like to speak first.
Yes, this is David Haddon. No further comment. It must have accidentally gone up the hand.
Well, it's good talking with you again.
Thank you, sir.
And you said Laura Knott had her hand up again. Laura?
Hi. So Attorney Passe brought up the point that the board can reserve the right to reconsider this yield plan at any time. So I would respectfully request that no matter what happens with any of the yield plans presented, that the board includes that stipulation in their wording of whatever approvals happen or disapprovals happen, so that they can reserve the right to reconsider the yield plan and the number of lots that were approved at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So do we want to table this to give us time to try to clear our minds up a little bit and get more clarity, or are the board ready to move ahead? I can close the public session. Let me close
Lang, thank you for closing the public session.
Let me just finish closing the public session. And Aaron, go ahead.
Sorry about that, Lang.
That's no problem. Just trying to make, cross the T's and dot the I's.
I was going to suggest that I would be much more comfortable having more time. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to need more time to dive through the lengthy caseload that this application has created and deserves proper attention. I don't want to, argue for or against the lot count without having all the testimony reviewed on my own, because it's significant. I mean, the difference between a 12 lot and a 17 lot approval is pretty significant to what happens in the field and what happens with the development. So I would like more time to review it, rather than reiterate it all and bring it all back up tonight and then have to go back again and, validate things.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat, Mr. Chair. I need more time.
John, how do you feel?
Similar. I look at this, and to Gwen's comments at the beginning of our discussion, it's almost like it's 4 different subdivisions connected by a wetland, and there's what was presented tonight is, I think, threw a little bit of a monkey wrench into adding lots 5 and 6 and whatever. But yeah, I also would be in favor of some additional time to kind of go back through some of the older plans.
Jen, are you on board for more time?
Yeah, I agree. I would appreciate some more time to take a closer look and just look at the older notes and all the letters and things, abutters comments that we received previously.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then Chair would entertain a motion to table till what's then our next meeting have on the agenda, Dave?
Lang, before we take a vote, could I make a request?
Sure.
I just want to request of the applicant, if they could get us, and this is probably specifically for Mr. Smith, if they could get us a couple of plans that are more simple to look at. I know Gwen has talked about coloring, which I tried, and yeah, good luck with that on this plan. It would be really helpful, Christian. I think the specific areas of concern are probably, the lots that have been under debate significantly through this testimony. It comes to mind 5, 6. Yeah. The ones that really kind of get added into play with the reintroduction of the Menendez parcel. I know it's more work for you, but hopefully you're just deleting lines and making a couple more printouts or something. That would be really helpful if I could make that request.
Just that's it. A clearer picture.
Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify on that.
Yes, please do.
So what are we talking about? Like eliminating topography? I'm assuming you're going to want to see the wetlands and the floodplains and all of that. I just want to get a gist of how simplistic you want to see this thing. I mean, I can pare it down to simply lot lines and setbacks if that's what you'd like, but I'm not sure if that's going to be perfectly useful. I think whatever plan we come up with could likely be sat down beside the one that you're looking at tonight to clarify points, but I just want to make sure that I'm keeping on there, the information that is critical for the board's review.
Let me ask you this, Aaron.
Yes.
When we're looking at the plan on the screen, Kristen was able to zero in, in a larger section. Would it be helpful if he cut this thing in 4 and made, larger?
I think that's a great idea because Christian, unfortunately, nowadays we're working on these. I don't know, what are they, 8.5 by 11 or 15s here, and we don't have your big, massive printer like you have in your office. So.
I can certainly provide the board with large, full-scale plans if that's helpful.
Well, it certainly wouldn't hurt. I don't want to make you go through terrible expense, but I'm also thinking, yes, I think the topography is probably not as critical of a line as wetlands. Right. The flood zone argument. I'm not sure how many of these you end up having to make, but if it's able to follow it more clearly, I think it's really, really helpful.
Quite honestly, I think if I turn off the topography and then color code wetlands differently than the floodplain, that should probably give you, and well, I guess it would have to be two wetlands because we've got the prime wetland boundary and then we've got the standard wetland boundary and then we've got the floodplain. But I can just color code the three of those just for an exhibit that can be set down next to the plan that we have.
That would be fantastic, Christian. That was really helpful because I think you can automate that a lot quicker than we can.
And then I can provide the board with the 15 large scale plans that should provide you, I think, clarity with regard to your ability to review.
Okay, that would be very helpful. Yep.
Thank you.
When you do that, we've had plans come in that are, the wetlands are color coded, but they don't look like wetlands. They look like green fields. Could you do them in a blue? And that
I can do them any color you'd like to see them.
We've had so many plans that come in.
I kind of like pink one.
No, I will absolutely change the wetland lines to be blue. I'm actually noting that on my page as we speak.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Very helpful. Yes.
Quick, Christian, could you also provide PDFs along with those hard copies? That way we can scale in and look at things on our monitors as well. If I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, we do provide PDFs to the board, or to the planning staff, I should say, every submittal that we do.
Barb will get those to us.
Yes.
Mark, yeah. So back to my question, Dave. What's the next meeting agenda look like? So the whenever
right,
it is.
The 28th,
21st.
And right now we have
28th, 28th.
Yeah, Riverwoods extension, addition, and Great Bridge Properties extension. So fairly light. We have one item on the agenda.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to table till 7 p.m. On the 28th.
Does that work for you, Christian?
January?
We'd have to get that turned around in a week, though.
All right.
Yeah, is that enough time, or?
Oh, that's not a problem.
Okay.
That's
or the first meeting otherwise it would be the first meeting in February.
February, yeah.
What does that meeting look like?
That's the meeting.
That doesn't have anything on the agenda that I'm aware. Oh, wait a minute. No, it might have a 12 lot subdivision, depending on the TRC review.
Okay, so there's room there too.
Yeah, we're happy with the 28th. That's not going to be a problem for me to get that accomplished.
Yeah, because, excuse me, it seems to me the sooner we get this, the better off we're all going to be.
Boy, you're smart, Pete.
A lot of reading to do.
That's right.
Boy.
All right. Lang, I can make a motion if you like.
Okay, please.
I'd like to make a motion to continue planning board case number 20-2 to a date certain of January 28th, 2021 at the planning board meeting at 7 p.m.
Okay. Is that Dave, is that okay to continue rather than the table? Or is that one and the same?
I see it as one and the same. It's you're telling when we're going to continue the discussion, so I'm good.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. Second? Did somebody second that?
I seconded that.
Oh, thank you, Jen. All right. Roll call. Let me get my sheet out here. All right. Let's start with you, Jen.
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Pete Cameron?
Yes.
John Gruder?
Yes.
Molly Cowan?
Yes.
Gwen English?
Yes.
And I say yes. So that's the decision, and unanimous by the board. So thank you for coming tonight, and we'll get this thing. See you again in 2 weeks. And Barb will get those plans as soon as Christian gets them over to her, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. All right. All right, our next item on the agenda is application of the IOCA Properties LLC for minor site plan review for the proposed redevelopment of the existing building located at 53 Water Street, former IOCA Theater. Subject property is located in the WC Waterfront Commercial Zoning District, tax map parcel number 72-34, and its planning board case number 20-20. Dave, do you have some comments to start us off with, I believe?
Yeah, the first one is it's complete for review purposes, in my opinion.
Okay. Thanks. That was a nice transition. I'd look for a motion then to review this plan for review purposes.
Also move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Okay, let's go through the roll call again. Glenn?
Yes.
Molly?
Yeah.
John?
Yes.
Okay. Pete Cameron?
Yes.
Aaron Brown?
Yes.
Jen Martell?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so we are ready to go. So now, Dave, would you begin the process for us, please?
I will, thank you. The applicant is seeking a minor site plan review of the proposed development of the existing structure located at 53 Water Street, the former IOCA Theater, into a combination of permitted uses, including retail, restaurant, and 8 residential condominium units. The applicant submitted a minor site plan and supporting documents dated December 8th, 2020, and those materials are included in your packet. The applicant did appear before the Zoning Board of Adjustment at the November 17th, 2020 meeting seeking relief from the height and rear yard setback requirements in the WC Commercial Zoning District, as well as relief from the off-street parking requirements. The ZBA granted all 3 of the variants as presented, and a copy of the notice decision and the minutes from that meeting were enclosed in the packet. There was no technical review committee review of the application. I struggled at first. I was like, it's in the existing building. It's not creating anything beyond that. So, but I did determine that site plan approval was required because it was a multifamily use, which didn't exist before. And there were parking requirements that the site obviously cannot meet because the site is all building. So I did, according to the regulations, the one comment I had was the waiver from the number of parking spaces will be needed. And I did provide a motion to that effect. And the ZBA did grant relief for it, but it's also in our site plan regs that references that off-street, parking must be provided in the schedule set forth in the zoning ordinance. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. And who do we have to speak to this tonight?
Mr. Chairman?
Sharon.
Yes.
You're welcome. I'm sorry. Too many faces on the screen.
I know. Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Sharon Summers. I'm with Donahue, Tucker, and Shindella, and I'm here tonight representing IOCA Properties, LLC. With me tonight are the principals of IOCA, which is David Cowie and Jay Caswell. Also with me are the architects that are involved in the project, which are Christina O'Brien and Adam Wagner of Market Square Architects, and Henry Boyd, who is the engineer for the project. As Dave Sharples alluded to, this is kind of an unusual situation in that we are seeking site plan approval for a project which has no changes to the site. And as a result...
That makes it easier.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so. So the application materials that you have before you consist of, number one, a plan, a survey plan, which Henry put together in conjunction with our variance application, and also some architectural materials, which just depict what's going to be happening in the building. And what we thought we would do tonight is to have the architects provide you a bit of an overview as to what the project is going to entail, just so that you understand the full scope of what we propose to do here. But beyond that, there's really no need to have any long, elaborate discussion about from an engineering standpoint, because there is no engineering. Once the architects are done providing an overview, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And then also, as Dave Sharples indicated, we do have a waiver request for the off-site parking, and I can address that. And following these discussions, it is our hope that we can get site plan approval tonight, subject to whatever conditions that standard conditions, which I believe Dave Sharples will be presenting. And as he also had indicated, this has not gone to TRC, but it's my understanding that it has been reviewed by the various department heads. And I think, with the exception of one or two minor comments by DPW, that there were no comments or concerns represented or presented by any of the department heads. So with that, what I'd like to do at this point is to simply turn it over to Christina O'Brien, who will provide an overview of what the architecture and what the project is all about. And then we can answer any questions that you may have. And then I'll go directly into the waiver presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you for hearing us tonight. Mr. Chairman, can I share my screen?
Please do. We love split screens.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to do tonight is just give you a broad brush overview of the project. We're happy to answer any questions, as Sharon had mentioned, during the presentation, or we can wait until after. I'll entertain both. So what we're going to do is we'll start with the current view of the building. The uses that are going to that we're proposing for the building in the lower level we're looking to add a speakeasy. The first floor will be retail, and the new second and third floors are proposed for living units, condominiums. Existing precast panels on this proposed third floor will be removed and added to the parapet area above, and that will help make space for new window openings for the living units on this portion of the building. Brand new windows and new doors will be added to the existing openings in kind. And with that, we'll go to our proposed rendering of the front Water Street elevation. We're also proposing some canopies over the new door openings, and we will be restoring some of the iconic letters from the marquee and adding those to the side of the building as a sign. On the river side of the building, the main item that will be removed is this wooden bump out. That was a bump out in the back of the performance stage. We'll also be adding a more like a patio down to this lower level, but within the building footprint. And we have some balconies that are going to be added on the rear of the building at the different levels. So we have a first floor balcony and second and third floor at the living units. We also are proposing a rooftop patio with a pergola, and this little bump out is the stair access to that. So with that, I'll just go to a brief, this is a roof plan just showing the extent of the rooftop patio. This is approximately 735 square feet, I believe, and it's just large enough for about 49 people. And that is code calculation based on, let me take a step back. This is only going to be used by the residents of the building and the 8 units that are on the 2 floors of the 2nd and 3rd floor. So this rooftop patio will only be accessible to the people that live in the building, not the retail portion of the building. Also proposing some planters for some green space up top, and these are proposed rooftop heating and cooling units. And then just briefly, these are our exterior drawings of the building, the front view showing the new 3rd floor windows going in, the Mayor Building precast panels that will be installed at the upper parapet portion, the new canopies going in, and all these new windows and doors that will be added. On the alleyway side, so this is on the east side of the building, we're adding new windows on this alleyway side for the living units and some at the stair tower. We have a new egress door at the basement level, and also actually we have 2 at the basement level for egress, with a new set of stairs leading to the street side. So this is the street side of Water Street, and obviously this is the water side. These are our balconies protruding from the building and our rooftop structure. And then finally, the rear of the building at the water side will have railings at the lower patio level. This is all contained within the existing footprint of the building. These are our patio levels and our rooftop level up top, and a pergola for just some shading and to make a nicer, more pleasant space up top for those residents who are using the rooftop patio. So that's the presentation for tonight. I'll happy to answer any questions or zoom in on anything that people are interested to look a little closer at.
Anyone who wants a closer look, speak now.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, sure.
I'm curious about, I think the building looks great. I'm curious about the rooftop deck that holds 49 people. I think you said there won't be 49 residents, so I guess you're allowed to invite guests. And this is probably nothing to do with planning board, but is that a noise issue? Does that come in to someone's jurisdiction? It's a rooftop deck.
Well, what I would say to that, and obviously David and Jay can jump in, is that the 49 is really that's a life safety code capacity issue. I think that as was Christina alluded to, the purpose of the deck is to serve the 8 residential units. What I would say is that it's unlikely. I think that and it's really just for their own recreation. It's unlikely that at any one time there's going to be that many people up there. In terms of noise, we do have good relations with our neighbors, the Masons. And also, obviously, as part of the residential component of this, the entire building will be subject to a condominium form of ownership. And so as part of the condominium form of ownership, there will be rules that will be implemented and enforced by the board of directors of that association. So I don't envision that would be really an issue.
If I can just make another comment about that, yes, you're right. The 49 is a life safety issue for the single means of egress we have up top. But at another board meeting, members of the board were concerned there would be 200 people up on the roof, and the maximum that could possibly be up top is 49. And I just wanted to clarify that. But again, it would only be used by the 8 people that own the 8 units within the building. So the odds that it would be full are pretty low, I would think.
You never know, though.
Well,
Related to that, is there any plumbing or anything up there? Or is it just everything they would use up there, they carry up the stairs, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a deck area.
It's a deck, correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Yep.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Excuse me. Are there going to be heating and air conditioning units up there, and will those be visible from the street or across the street?
There will be heating and cooling units. Fortunately, we have, I'll go to this side elevation. We have the existing parapet is just about in line with the size of those units, so it should not allow visibility from the street level.
Thank you.
Should be a natural screen. You're welcome.
Access to the lowest level, the speakeasy, is that going to be down the stairs and on this side, or will there be a front door access inside?
Yep, there's access on both sides. You can come down the alleyway and enter this side door, or you can go in the front entrance, and there will be a stair and an elevator available inside to get down to the basement level.
And also tenants can use that, or occupants can use that elevator going up.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
If there are no other questions of the board, then I'd be happy to proceed with a discussion about the waiver request. Or do you want to look at it for a few more minutes?
Let me just say,
can we talk about the parking?
We can, but while we wait, that's going to be the request coming up in a minute.
Okay.
Right.
We'll just talk about the features of the building right now.
All right, sorry.
Can I ask another question about the building?
Yes, John.
And this is just curious. The back of that building, the speakeasy area, where you're going to build the outdoor deck, has the arches and everything. Was that original with that building, or is that something that was added or changed? This has nothing to do with approving the plan or not. I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, if it was original to
the arch is in the back of the building. It's built like almost out to the river, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Is that original? Was that something that was changed or added on?
The arches, no, the arches are there. This is the existing photo.
Okay.
Yep, the arches are
I know they're there. Were they there in 1910 or 1905, whenever it was built?
I'm assuming it's part of the foundation to hold that back portion of the building up. So I would say yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other board members that have any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a few questions.
Yes, Jen.
And then I think also Aaron Brown has his hand raised.
Okay.
That's another freaking, I'm not good at lowering it. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah. So I have a few questions. My first question is about the river and the flood elevations and the tidal, like high water elevation. And I'm not seeing anything on your plans that indicate where that is. I'm just wondering if that's something you've looked at, and if there's a concern about, that public space and the speakeasy flooding. And also, I'm just curious if there's any kind of, building. It's such a weird building because it's in the river, so you're building fences and things. And I was wondering if this is going to, if there's any state permitting, wetlands permitting as a result of building,
over the water
opportunities
in the floodway. So that's my first question.
Yep, that process has already been started for I believe wetlands approval, and I don't know if the applicant David would like to speak to that, but he's knows a little bit more about that than I do.
Also, I'm here to speak on that. We have, and you're absolutely right, Jen. It is a very, very unique building. As far as about a year ago, I had started discussions with Evan Lewis at the DES because this will require a New Hampshire DES wetlands permit. It is a standard wetlands permit, but I hadn't been involved with anything quite like this. So we sought his advice to try to see not only what kind of permit it would be, but also what would they be looking for on the plans? Because there's a substantial amount of work that we have done already in anticipating meeting with him, but also the Conservation Commission before we submit our approval. And the floodplain questions are absolutely valid. We have done an elevation certificate on the site, and the lower floor is actually above the base flood elevation. It is a very strange site. There's a dynamic that goes on out there with the riverbed and as the river flows by. So we've done extensive survey work to locate not only the staining, but tried to map the behavior of the river. So it's been influenced by a lot of things out there. Portions of this area were actually removed from the floodplain with a LOMR that was done by FEMA. So there's a specific map that was generated. And I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago that it became effective. So that may be something that you'd be interested in looking at just as overall edification for that area between the bridge and the string bridge. It's just kind of interesting, and you'd probably like to learn about that. One of the things that they're going to be particularly concerned with, and that I've learned from Eben, is construction sequence, because we're actually not going to be doing anything in the river itself except for repairing some damage that has occurred to those beautiful columns and the piers that produce the arches in the back of the building. So the back portion of that building, just interestingly, that was put on after the original building was built, I think in 1915. So that came in at a certain time after that. I don't know the exact date, but so there's going to be some repair that's done there. Nothing is going to be in the river, touching the river, other than what touches the river now. And we have challenged the engineers to look at the flows of the river water that goes in there. So there will be an extensive amount of not only plans, but environmental report. We've hired Sergio Bonilla from Missions Wetland to go out and help us with not only identification of vegetative species that are in there, but also we've got an NHB report that talks about species, fish species especially, and all sorts of life that's in that river. So we're absolutely conscious of that and planning for all of it, not to impede the lifestyle of the existing creatures that enjoy that river and even under that building. So that's a great question, and yes, we're on top of it, and we are producing an amazing plan set that will satisfy the DES.
Thank you. That was
very
interesting to hear the process for something like this, because it's such a unique site. I do have a few other questions, Mr. Chair, if I can keep going.
Yes, please do.
So I was curious about how trash removal is going to be handled, both the commercial trash and the residential trash.
We are proposing to have a trash area inside the building for the residents to use and for the retail spaces to use as well.
And how will that be removed from the building, picked up? Is it going to be put out on the street, or?
That's the way the other businesses do.
Yeah, my guess would be it would be contained inside the building until trash pickup day, and then it would be brought out at that time.
And then my other question was about the roof deck. Will there be lighting up on the roof deck?
That's a good question. We don't have any proposed right at this time. We do have the pergola that we're proposing. But honestly, we, as a design team, we have not talked about lighting up at the roof deck right now.
I'll jump in on that if I may. This is Adam Wagner with Market Square Architects. We are going to be required by code to have some lighting up there. Because it leads the way to the guest stair. But beyond code required lighting, we have not yet discussed that further with the client.
Yeah, I guess our preference, just from or at least from my point of view, and I think our regulations emphasize that exterior lighting should be downlit, dark sky compliant. I know security lighting can be pretty bright, but especially given the location right on the river, I would like to see something that has like a full cutoff.
Yeah,
and across from the library as well.
Yep. Right.
That was all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other board member? Well, let's go on to parking, Sharon.
Okay. Well, so the waiver request, what I would start out by saying is that we are here solely by virtue of the fact that this is has a residential, a multifamily component to it. In discussions with Dave Sharple, he indicated that he felt this did need to go to site review, even in spite of because of the fact that your regulations call for jurisdiction due to the multifamily. So I want to have the board bear that in mind as we discuss parking. What we have done is to seek and obtain a variance from the ZBA for 91 off-street parking, and that reflects the entirety of the needs for both the commercial and the residential component of the parking. The residential component of the parking, which is, of course, the basis of your jurisdiction as the planning board, consists of a total of 18. The residential spaces require 16, and then there's 2 spaces for visitors that are required for that. So I just want you to have that in mind by way of context. So turning to the actual criteria, 13.7.1, we believe that the granting of the waiver will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare. The users of this property, both the residential and the commercial, can park on the street and on the various municipal parking lots in the same fashion as the other properties that are situated along Water Street there. And in addition to that, we are unaware of any of the other abutters nearby us who believe that our parking needs would be injurious to their property. We did check today to determine whether or not there were any written objections or concerns that were filed with the planning department, and it is our understanding that there are none. Obviously, we haven't heard from any members of the public tonight, but certainly in our efforts to try to work closely with the other abutters along the street, we believe that there are no concerns that have been expressed to us about the impact that we may have on the parking needs of other properties. So with that, we believe that we have satisfied the criteria that our parking needs and the waiver would not be detrimental to the public safety, health, or welfare of this area. The second criteria has to do with the conditions upon which the request for the waiver is based, and what those conditions might be that would be unique and not generally applicable to the other property. What I discussed in the written materials that I submitted to you is that the town has a system for some of these downtown properties in which they try to sort of keep track. The terminology that's typically used in discussions with Doug Eastman and others is the pool of spaces that might be grandfathered. So in this case, as you know, the IOCA was once a 300-seat movie theater. And so in conjunction with the formula that was used, we had at one point 100 grandfathered parking spaces. And it's our position that that number of parking spaces makes us unique because it's much larger, really, than any of the other properties in the nearby area. In addition to that, one of the things that makes us unique is that, unfortunately, and you're all very familiar with the sequence of events with the IOCA, it sat dormant for ages and ages. And essentially the grandfather status and the ability of either us or any previous owners to be able to utilize that grandfathered status and thus avoid the need to seek waiver relief like this lapsed. And for that reason, that also makes us unique relative to other properties in the area. The next waiver criteria is that because of the physical surroundings, shape, or topographical conditions of this property, that a particular hardship to the owner would result as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if these regulations are going to be strictly adhered to. That is, I think, pretty self-evident because of the fact that we have no physical space on the property to provide any of the parking spaces that are going to be needed for the driving force of this board, which is the residential spaces. So there is nothing which could to enable us to provide what we would otherwise have to provide. In addition to that, I want to point out that the Exeter Master Plan really hones in on this property and hones in on the importance of trying to do what is necessary in order to redevelop it. The ZBA did recognize that fact in granting us the variance application, and given the lack of the physical ability to be able to place parking on the site, and on the fact that by default that means that the parking has to occur on either on the nearby streets or on the municipal parking lots, that if the denial of this waiver would constitute a hardship, because the net result is that we would not be able to move forward at all. We have to have the ability to have these people park somewhere. There is no place on the site, and there is available parking nearby on the streets and in the sidewalks. Therefore, we believe that we meet this criteria because of the existence of that hardship. It is well and above the standard of a mere inconvenience. The fourth element is whether or not the granting of the waiver is going to be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulations. I would argue that the intent of the regulations is to requiring off-street parking is to provide some mechanism to prevent other properties in the area from being overly burdened by our particular parking needs, or vice versa. And so I believe that the spirit and intent here is not contrary if this waiver is going to be granted, because of the fact that there are available resources for us to park. And also, as was discussed at some length with the ZBA, the nature of what we're talking about, particularly for the residential needs, there's kind of a staggered element to the parking needs. We have a combination of commercial parking needs, which, as you know, is not really part of your purview because that's not part of the jurisdictional motivation. But the residential parking needs will tend to be more utilized at different times than the bulk of the commercial needs, which is like presumably the lion's share of those residential parking spaces are going to be empty. So we believe, in essence, that there's nothing about what we're talking about which is going to create any sort of undue burden to the other abutting properties, and therefore there is no violation of the spirit and intent. And then lastly, the waiver is not going to vary the provisions of the zoning ordinance or the master plan. In fact, the master plan very much talks about redeveloping this. And so we are very much consistent with the master plan. And then the second thing is that we don't vary the provisions of the zoning ordinance by virtue of the fact that we've already been to the ZBA on this very issue, and we've received variance approval from them, and therefore we would be in compliance with that zoning ordinance. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about parking at this time. And that's really all we have at this point.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Questions on the part of the board? So, Pete, Cameron?
A couple of questions. This is a different type of parking, though. This is going to be 24/7. In other words, there will be cars there for just not for a couple of hours or for a portion of the day. There will be cars there all night long. So that it's a little bit different, I think, than the case of the movie theater, where when the show got out, all the people who had driven drove away. The other issue, or the other concern I have is, has any thought been given to the possible form of, I'll call it payment for parking? In other words, if we get to a point where parking meters or some form of paid parking will be instituted, how are you going to handle that?
Well, I guess, first of all, let me answer those questions in order. I think with regard to your comment about the fact that there would be a 24-hour parking need, I don't believe that this particular property is going to generate, any more so than other properties, a 24-hour need, or if it does, it's going to be of a staggered nature. As I said, I mean, we're going to have retail in there, which will be largely a daytime parking demand. So those cars will come and go largely during the daytime. The residential properties will largely be using, perhaps not exclusively, but largely be using the parking spaces in the evening, overnight, when they're at home sleeping. And then the restaurant will be able to sort of fit in between really both of those, most likely in the evening type of areas. So I don't think that this is going to be, I understand your point, and I appreciate your point that when this was a movie theater, there was a big rush of cars going in and then going out. I don't even know where they parked at that point, because there may not have been a municipal parking lot. But I don't think that the change in the parking patterns that you're describing is necessarily going to constitute a down there. I think it's going to be simply more of the same of what's already going on down there. And I would note that in preparation for the proceedings before the ZBA, I did a little research, and there was a parking study, for lack of a better word. It was a survey more than anything back in 2018 for the town of Exeter. And that survey concluded that there was actually a fair amount of parking downtown. There was some concerns about traffic congestion per se, but not parking. And if anything, there was a concern. The issue was really a perception of parking absences rather than the actual thing itself. And then as to your second question, which, forgive me now, it's just flown out of my head. What was your second question?
It had to do with the possibility that some form of paid parking would be instituted in Exeter.
So I guess what I would say to that is that obviously if the town of Exeter chooses to pursue various parking improvements, for lack of a better word, whether that's going to be meters or some other kind of facility, we would do whatever is going to be necessary in order to comply with that. If meters are going to be installed, then that's going to become part of the requirement. Presumably also the patrons of the retail and the restaurant to use those meters.
I guess I was more concerned with those who the overnight parking with respect to some form of paid. Either you lease a spot or lease a couple of spots in the municipal parking area, but I think I understand where you're all coming from.
I think the simple answer is that if as the town's parking regime evolves, and if the town should find themselves, a year from now or whenever, instituting some sort of reserved leased parking spaces like other communities have, or parking meters, then it would be incumbent upon the residents of those condo units to follow suit.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a few questions if I could.
Okay.
David, you're still with us, right? Can you answer questions?
Yes, he can answer questions.
Okay.
His phone's still connected.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I can see he's in the attendees, but I just want to make sure. Before I ask my question, a comment was just made about a parking study, and I think that was a bunch of volunteers with clipboards, and it wasn't an official parking study. So I also don't think it was in 2018. Does anybody on the board remember what year it was? Because I'm thinking it was something like 2010. Dave, do you remember?
It predated me. I don't remember what year it was.
Yeah.
I can actually answer that. The parking study that I was referring to, and there may have been others, was done by the Rockingham Planning Commission that was done in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, they kind of did a survey and did a report online, about 886 respondents.
Right. So that wasn't a study. That was a survey.
Oh, no. I never indicated
put,
a study. I indicated it was a survey.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, so I'm going to go to my question. What you were talking about with parking spaces, though, in my mind, you were discussing something that was more of a multi-use building that has its own parking lot. So yes, you would have residents leaving in the morning, typically coming home at night, businesses open during the day. So the parking would be, which is perfect in my opinion, but we're talking about winter parking bans here. Where would 18 people park overnight in the wintertime during a parking ban? In the municipal parking lot?
I think they're going to have to make their own arrangements to figure out where they're going to go during the winter. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's where my big concern is. So we're going to have up to 18 residents who have to figure out where they're going to park during the winter and during our winter ban. Okay, thank you for answering that.
My question is, are there other residences, that is overnight residences, that also use that lot? I mean, maybe they have an extra vehicle, I don't know, but what's the demand? That's why you need traffic study, I guess. What's the demand of that parking lot 24 hours a day? And this is going to add to that load, whatever's there now. I'm not sure. I'm just curious as to the spaces. There's certainly space at nighttime for that number of vehicles because most everybody's gone home or they've finished at the Chinese restaurant and have left, or other restaurants in town because the lot's pretty full then. But probably, 9, 10 o'clock after, there's plenty of space in that parking lot for.
Yeah, Dave, are you there? Because that was another one of my follow-ups was, I know that there are certain areas in the municipal parking lot, but it's not the whole parking lot.
Yeah, and I think some part of that parking lot, you got to move your vehicle from one area to another. I don't know what the rules are. I have no idea.
I know at least the back part. I'm not exactly familiar with the winter ban rules, but I know at least the back part. I see a lot of cars stay there for an extended amount of time. And the bottom line on parking, really is that there is capacity within the downtown right now. I did, utilization rate study and found that the municipal lot during the day, Monday through Friday, particularly between like 11 and 1, got up to about, 90%, sometimes even 100% utilization rate. That's pretty much full. But it drops off later in the day by 7, 8 o'clock, it drops off, and then at nighttime, it's not even close. I can't quote what the utilization rate, but I did a couple of spot studies really early in the morning, and there's not a lot of cars there. I think the bottom line with parking downtown is these kind of developments, underutilized properties, fill them. There isn't any parking available. I think it's incumbent upon the town to manage the parking. We've tried to do that and tried to move that ball forward. The town voted actually to install meters out on Lincoln Street at the last town warrant, but then COVID came and kind of threw everything in a loop. And I think we're going to continue that conversation about the downtown and managing the downtown parking. But certainly there's enough to absorb. There's enough on-street parking and off-street public parking in this area to absorb this proposal.
Yeah. Yep.
In my opinion, anyway.
The details will have to evolve later on somehow.
Right.
I think it's incumbent upon us to manage it.
And I would also add too, and Dave may be able to weigh on this as well, but there are other downtown residential apartments and so forth right along that stretch as well, none of whom would have parking, and presumably they're going to be in the same situation in terms of winter bans, and I believe that there's probably some means by which the town can alert them to the fact that there is going to be a snow ban and they're going to have to move their car. And then it just becomes, it's the responsibility of the tenant or the individual condo unit owner, just like any kind of a downtown residential parking situation. It's the nature of the beast.
Yep.
Yes, I agree. My concern is that that's going to add 18 more cars to people who already are here and in that situation. That's my concern. Are we going to, I understand what the town planner just said, fine. I'm just saying, I'm really concerned about the people who already have apartments there and residents. And is that going to, I think that's going to cause a problem or a potential one. That's my only point and reason for my questions.
And I appreciate that. And I guess Dave's comments seem to suggest that there is enough capacity at this point, and certainly it may be that the town may need to. I think there's two things going on. One is that the master plan of the town is very clear that the IOCA in particular needs to be redeveloped. And so that particular objective of the town plans needs to be taken into account and weighed against the parking issues that we're talking about right now. As well, I think that there may be, of all the things we're talking, need to be town initiatives going forward, whether that's being, and these are all policy matters in terms of metering, any number of things to try to address on a more global scale, potentially the use of private parking lots. I don't know. I mean, that's a discussion for another evening.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to add, I was saying there is capacity, but I wasn't saying there isn't potential for problems and problems won't occur with this. I think they very likely could. Residents could park in front of the IOCA, and then the business that's in there, could rely on drive-by traffic and have an issue with the residents parking there. I think that all underscores, and that can happen anywhere. And this is not the only, residents above. I think that underscores the need for the town to start looking at the downtown parking and manage it.
Yeah. Aaron, you had a question to change the subject.
Yeah, thanks, Lonnie. Not a complete change on the subject, but
okay.
I've been a part of multiple parking discussions as part of the master plan oversight committee. Pete Cameron, John Gruder have been in those with me, and Dave Sharples, of course, at length. There's a lot of different options for the town to go forward, and one of my biggest concerns as a citizen in Exeter is that lack of the town being progressive in addressing its parking issue should not hurt a developer. So I am very much in favor of granting a parking waiver, because I think, in my experience, when a town starts to build out capacity in parking, a downtown becomes more vibrant. And if we start to see more need, maybe that'll be the thing that pushes our citizens to be a little more assertive in that regard, such as a potential garage location and that sort of thing. So I want to commend this applicant for what I think is an absolute beautiful plan. I'm really excited about what you're doing and looking to do at this landmark property in our town. And really do want to thank you for taking the risk and the initiative to get this going, because this property has sat dormant for quite a while. And I would hate to see you, stumble here. So very much in favor of the waiver. I'm very educated on the parking issue in downtown. I've spent the last few years being involved in that, and Dave's absolutely right. We kind of got detracted here with the COVID issue. But the town itself, that's a town issue. That's not an applicant issue. And I really think, Nancy, your comments and concerns are reasonable. And I want to assure you, I think this is not going to be the straw that breaks anybody's back.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. That makes me think of the Epping Road signal. That evolved again as the need arose. So that's a different type of thing, but that's how it happened. Yep. Any other questions? I don't awaken. Let's see. Pete Steckler has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this conversation, I think, is a good one for to keep in mind the next time we talk about impact fees and options A, B, or C. So I was just thinking about that. But also, I was wondering if there's any mechanisms to limit the condominium owners from parking on street, during business hours in front of the businesses where, pulling in to do a takeout order, drop into a store quickly. If there's any mechanisms to sort of preserve those spaces for, and I know that's tough, but it's just something I'm thinking about, and I don't know if anybody else is thinking about that or has any ideas for how to, really maintain those on-street parking spaces, especially in front of this building for, the retail and restaurants in the area.
Yeah, John Gruder.
You'd never be able to enforce it. If we had meters downtown that were expensive enough, and then cheaper meters at the back end of the municipal lot, you might be able to get the condo people out to the back side of the lot. But if they all agree in the Ioka building not to park in front of the building, that doesn't stop the people in the apartments in the next building and the building after that. And not too long ago, we looked at, I think, the Woolworth building about adding some condos on that. And I don't know what's happened to that, but that could come back. I don't know. It's pretty much unenforceable.
Question that came across my mind is, of the 8 condominiums, what size are they in terms of bedrooms? 1, 2, 3? Are they going to be different, or?
I believe they are all going to be 2 bedrooms.
2 bedroom. Okay,
that's correct. They're each 2 bedrooms.
No, they can't. Some of them that don't have a second means of egress that you don't have beds in on 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms. The ones on the west side that don't.
We do have a second means of egress, though. We have a rated hallway leading to the rated stairwell. And we've talked with a fire protection engineer to help us with the building code with that determination.
But out of that bedroom, which the ones on the west side of the property, the second bedroom you don't have a bed drawn in, where the east side, the east side you do. That side has windows.
Correct.
The west side doesn't have windows. So out of that bedroom, there's not 2 means of egress.
Correct, but the building will be fully sprinklered, and that gives us an allowance to have a single means out of the bedroom, but there's there's two means of egress out of the unit. Out of the
unit, I
apartment
agree,
unit.
but I noticed that the beds weren't drawn in, so I assumed that would meant it was
I
only
see.
one bedroom.
No, that's an older plan, I believe, but they each have 2 bedrooms.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any more questions about the request for and the justification for the parking space waiver? Because I think we're ready for take action on that. So I'd ask for a motion, please.
Gwen's hands up.
Gwen.
I just have a quick question. Do we still have a 2-hour parking limit in Exeter?
We're not going to talk about that in public, right, Dave?
Well, I don't know that anyone's around to enforce it. I know Neil
We
is.
do.
But we do
have it. Yeah.
So-
Yeah, it's an enforcement issue, Gwen.
I know. I totally understand that.
It's still on record that it's 2 hours.
Existed anymore.
It's 2 hours. So every time you get to that 2 hour, you need to just decide to move your car.
Right. Get your phone to ring in 2 hours.
Set your alarm.
Okay.
It was just a follow up to Peter's question, and anyway, I'll leave it be.
I'm willing to make a motion.
Okay, Aaron. Thank you.
After reviewing the criteria for granting waivers, I move that the request of Ioka Properties LLC, Planning Board Case Number 20-20, for a waiver from Section 9.13.1 to permit less off-street parking than required in accordance with Section 5.6.6 of the zoning ordinance be approved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
John seconded. Okay. Any questions about the motion? Then we'll take our vote. Oh, Jen, let's start with you.
Yes.
Gwen?
Yes.
And Molly?
Yes.
John Gruder?
Yes.
Pete Cameron?
An enthusiastic yes.
Okay. Aaron Brown?
Another enthusiastic yes.
And the chairman throws in an enthusiastic yes. That's approved. Is there any more discussion about the minor?
I can make another motion if you're ready.
Okay. I thought it.
May I, before you do, add a couple of suggested conditions of approval?
Yep, please. Dave?
Yes. One, an electronic as-built with details acceptable to the town shall be provided prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. This plan must be in DWG DFX file format and NAD State Plane, New Hampshire FIPS 28 feet coordinates. And when I say as-built plan, there are a couple of changes, but basically I'm more concerned about the property lines and so forth that they surveyed to have those in DFX format. Number 2, a pre-construction meeting shall be arranged by the applicant and his contractor with the town engineer prior to any site work commencing. The reason why I ask for that, usually we do a pre-con meeting with all these requirements, but I think just at that site, going in there and construct, we just want to talk about any changes to utilities and so forth. That's the point behind that. But it won't go beyond that. And number 3, all outdoor lighting, including security lights, shall be downlit and shielded, so no direct light is visible from the adjacent properties and/or roadways where feasible.
Dave, do you talk at all about traffic pattern during construction?
Yeah, that's what we talk about. Like, where are you going to park? Where, do you need a laid out area and so forth? That's why we just want to have a conversation before they
did
start.
a nice job.
Yeah,
they did a nice job with demolition. Just the dumpsters came and went, and I don't think anybody really got held up. So, thank you. Okay, now, Aaron, you have the motion to.
I'm ready. Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one more question of the applicant before we?
Sure, Jen.
Sorry, we moved on to parking, and another question came up, and I wasn't sure where to ask this, but I was just wondering. So you mentioned stairwell. So does that mean that there's no elevator in the building? It's just stairs.
No, there is an elevator.
There is an elevator.
Yeah,
okay.
we talked about that.
Oh,
to get downstairs and to get upstairs.
Okay. I thought it was just a stairwell. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
that part of the conversation. So I guess my concern was the downstairs, the basement restaurant speakeasy would be accessible to someone who's in a wheelchair, but it sounds like it would be if there's an elevator.
It would be.
Thank you.
You could enter the main entry on Water Street and access the elevator that way.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Let's see. Aaron, you're going to make a motion.
Okay. I move that the request of Ioka Properties LLC Planning Board case number 20-20 for minor site plan approval be approved with the conditions as read by Town Planner David Sharples.
Is there a second, please?
I will second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Gwen. Any discussion on the motion? Then I'll call for the vote. Pete Cameron.
I move an enthusiastic yes, and I move we make this unanimous.
Okay. Molly Cowan.
Yes.
Gwen English.
Yes.
John Gruder.
Yes.
Jen Martell.
Yes.
Aaron Brown.
Absolutely. Good luck, guys.
And Lang Plummer. Ditto. Unanimous vote.
Thank you very much. You appreciate
Thank you for your time. Sorry to hold you up a little
Beautiful
while.
project.
That's all right.
We look forward to seeing it done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are you looking for one more motion tonight, Lang?
I think I am. I'm looking for the agenda, but I don't see. What did the town planner have anything tonight? Last comments on the phone.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Dave's good. Okay. Molly seconded. We stand adjourned.
Well, good night, guys.
Thank you very much. Do your homework.